Welcome back to Fatman Reviews, where today we review the first edition copy of the Communist Manifesto. So, last night I was laying in bed, right? I was getting snuggly, it's getting warm, I had a quilt over me. I had my Snorlax plushie, the massive big plushies that are like 60 quid. Yeah, I had one of those with me. And I was laying there, most people do their best thinking when they're laying down. So, I was laying down, getting ready for bed. I just finished watching One Piece. Yeah, I'm on like fucking episode 90 of 1,000 and something. Yeah, I'm never going to get to 1,000. But, hey, it's a start. Come on, it's a start. Anyway. So there I was, finished watching One Piece, laying in my bed, and I had an epiphany. A thought came to me. My channel is called Fatman Reviews, yet I've never actually done a review on anything. So anyway, here's a Resident Evil retrospective. I want to start by saying, at the time of recording this, I'm very sick. I'm very ill, so I'm sorry if my voice is a bit different from normal. I thought, I might as well, I gotta stop saying and all the fucking time, seriously. I thought that instead of prolonging the video for another few weeks, I might as well just try and do what I can now. Leave it to me to edit all the shit out, and I'm sure it'll be fine. Resident Evil 1 was created by the legendary Shinji Mikami, who has also made God Hand and Dino Crisis, three of the greatest games of all time, and that's a huge achievement for one guy, come on. God bless you, you magnificent son of a bitch. It's impossible to talk about gaming, specifically survival horror and horror as a whole genre itself, without talking about the impact Shinji Mikami has had and continues to have on horror and gaming as a whole. And where better to start than with his, in my opinion, magnum opus, Resident Evil. I want to preface something before I start, and this is probably going to piss a lot of people off. I am playing the remastered version on Steam, or remake, whatever the fuck you want to call it. I have access to and have played many times the original PlayStation 1 version, as well as the original Japanese Biohazard version. Resident Evil 1 was a huge part of my childhood. The reason I'm choosing the remake is simply for ease of recording. Sure, I could just emulate it, but I feel like that would only deteriorate the authenticity of playing this masterpiece. Plus, in all honesty, I've never really played the remaster all the way through, so it will be a learning experience for us all. For the sake of canonicity, I chose to do the majority of this playthrough as Jill. I say the majority, I did all of this playthrough as Jill. I will comment later on Chris's run, but for the main part, it will be Jill's playthrough only. In today's society, we have tons of great female leads in video games, but back in 1996, having female figures as protagonists was still quite a foreign concept. With the release of Resident Evil, however, Jill became an instant fan favourite. A lot of people even refer to her as the first lady of survival horror. I'd go so far as to say that Jill Valentine was a trailblazer for female protagonists full stop, alongside Lara Croft, Samus and Regina from Shinji Mikami's other game, Dino Crisis. I feel like by having a woman as the canonical protagonist, it really does add to Resident Evil 1's horror aspect. It's not a far cry to say that Chris is meant to be a macho, generic action guy in this one, so if he was the only protagonist we got, it would be very, very generic. But by having Jill as the protagonist, it reflects on what Resident Evil sets out to be in the first place. Resident Evil was meant to be new, it was meant to defy industry norms and establish itself as a survival horror, which it did, essentially giving birth to modern survival horror games, and by having Jill Valentine break the gender stereotype of the time greatly complements everything the game stands for, and plays a huge part in making the game as legendary as it is. When starting the game, we are immediately treated to a VMA, which gives us all the info dump we need to understand what the fuck is going on. Later Resident Evil games tend to have a much more complicated story filled with evil pharmaceuticals or military sectors, espionage, cult stuff and world-ending level monsters, but Resident Evil 1 tries to keep things a bit tamer while it still does a very good job of establishing a rich story. It keeps to itself, but somehow also manages to test the waters by world building outside of the Spencer Mansion into greater and further locations that we'll explore in other Resident Evils. But for now, they're just slightly mentioned, and you know what, that's enough. That's good enough to establish an outside world. For some reason, Capcom released a really cringy real-life actor showcase of all the main characters. It's fucking hilarious. Just watch this.
Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Barry Burton, Rebecca Chambers, Albert Wesker, Resident Evil.
Going back to the main game, however, we find out that the STARS team, standing for Special Tactics and Rescue Service, is searching for the crash site of their Bravo team, which crashed into a forest. The two teams, Alpha and Bravo, consist of members Albert Wesker, Barry Burton, Brad Vickers, Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, and Joseph Forrest, with only one member dying throughout the game, that being Forrest, who is ironically killed by dogs in a forest. Bravo team isn't featured as much in this game, but is still prevalent in the prequel Resident Evil 0. The team consists of Rebecca Chambers, Richard Eichen, Edward Dewey, Enrico Marini, Forrest Speyer, Kenneth J. Sullivan, and Kevin Dooley, who mostly all meet a grisly death. The only one that survives in this team, as far as I know, is Rebecca, who is alive up to the 8th installment, I believe. I could be very wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure she's still alive to this day. Jill does come across Richard, Enrico and Forrest, who is picked to death by crows, which, wow, what a hell of a way to die. Pretty much everyone on both teams are dead besides Jill, Barry, Albert, Brad, Rebecca, and technically Chris is alive too, but nobody in the Spencer Mansion knows that yet. After alerting the dogs to their presence, they make a run for the Spencer Mansion and lock themselves in. Well, kind of lock themselves in. There's absolutely nothing stopping you from interacting with and opening the door again, except you'll be met with a secret cutscene and you will die. Which is really fucking cool, to be honest. And it's a shame this sort of stuff doesn't happen much in games anymore. One thing Resident Evil does a lot is not hold your hand. There's no huge indications on where you're meant to be going in the mansion, especially at the start. You're just given a general overarching objective and left to explore as you like. Barry and Jill hear a gunshot in the next room to the hall and go to investigate, while Wesker stays in the main hall. Wesker is... he's a little sussy man. He's a little sussy bucker throughout the first couple of hours. Keep an eye on him. He's a bit sussy. Barry finds blood and gives it a real thorough inspection. He gives it a A real inspection. Barry, he worries me in this. Jill goes to the next hall over, while Barry inspects the blood. If you explore around, you'll find most of the doors are locked. That is, until you turn the corner, and one of the most legendary cutscenes of all time plays out. Child Charlie would be shitting himself watching this. I wait around the corner for nothing to happen, then try to grab the zombie's attention so I can eliminate him, even though he took a hell of a big chunk of my health away. I want to address again that I'm playing the Steam port, so you will see achievements as well as the cursor. I know it's a huge sin, but I'm playing on mouse and keyboard because controller support for my computer does not fucking work whatsoever. No matter how hard I try, I think there's something wrong with my USB port, but I was forced to use keyboard and mouse. Once we kill the zombie, we can run back into the dining hall where Barry was. I accidentally skipped the cutscene, and I promise this is the only time I ever do this, because I'm a complete brainlet. But you don't really miss much. Jill and Barry just talk about what they saw and shit like that. I also decided here to change the aspect ratio back to the original 90s look for that crisp aesthetic feel. I didn't play this Resident Evil 1 remake all in one day. In fact, I only ever played it at night over the course of roughly about a week, which took overall 8-9 hours maybe, condensed down into 6 hours of gameplay. That's what I've got. I've got 10 videos here, it's 6 hours of gameplay that I got to cut down. But overall, I must have done about 9 hours or so. A lot of it's cut out because it's just me dying and then having to retread everything I've done already. It was a fucking pain in the ass. Seriously, I love Resident Evil 1, but sometimes it can be a real bitch. And to be honest, 8-9 hours isn't really bad for a game I haven't played in over 11 years. I'm also a massive hater of tank controls, and you will see me struggle a lot with them, especially in some of the tighter situations. With all of that out of the way, we can move on to exploring the actual mansion now. Our first move is to take Barry with us back to the main hall, but before we can, the zombie starts knocking on the door, which I completely ignored for now. When in the main hall, we find Wesker is gone. See what I mean about him being a sussy bucker? He's gone, and we go on the search for him, at least only in the main hall.
Wesker! Jill, help me look for him. Let's not leave this hall.
Good idea.
One thing I need to mention is Resident Evil's use of doors. Sure, from a technical standpoint, it stands to serve only as a way around loading different areas, but it also adds to the fear of the game and its raspy environment. While yes, it can get tedious at times later and slow down the pacing, it's these first couple of hours that are really important to draw you into the world, which the doors help perfectly. You'll see a lot in my playthrough that my smooth monkey brain remembers some parts, like an item or a puzzle, or a room location, but a lot of the other puzzles, I won't lie to you, I used guides for. The absolute worst part was definitely towards the end when finding the underground in order to get the stone ring. I cannot tell you how fucking long that took. I cut a hell of a lot of it out, but trust me, that took up the majority of my time. It really took the life out of me. Here in this little room, we're once again crowded with a close-up zombie. The Spencer Mansion's rooms are mostly all designed to be as claustrophobic as humanly possible. This amps up the horror and fear, especially in late games, with scarier enemies like the hunters. I know I said I hate tank controls, and I still do, but when you add a scary enemy, plus tight room and unbearable controls, you get one hell of a terrifying combination. Hell, most of the fear I got from replaying this game was in situations exactly like this. Right now, I'm still trying to gather my bearings. Much like someone who would have played this for the first time, I have no fucking clue what I'm doing. It's been 11 years, shut up. One aspect of Resident Evil is that the game heavily encourages you to explore and progress in whatever order you want, at whatever pace you want. There's no set way to get items. Sure, key items like keys and stuff you need to get in linear progression, but as for other items, they're either accessible at any time or completely optional. So long as you have the right keys, you can explore any room in the mansion at any pace you want. Later on, you need to get 4 things: 2 metal objects and 2 medallions. What you're meant to do is use the objects, progress a bit, and then find out you need the medallions right near the end. But because I had that prior knowledge of knowing I needed them, I didn't have to backtrack and could just progress. Resident Evil 1 is filled to the brim with stuff like this. Hell, exploring at your own will is encouraged further in the story. Spoilers for later, by the way. In the lab, either Jill or Chris, depending on who you play as, will be trapped in a cell, and the only way to get them out is by using 3 discs, one of which is behind a statue in the mansion which requires a yellow gem. This is something entirely optional that impacts the story and the ending you get. Resident Evil 1 boasts 12 endings. While they don't offer much in story impact, they are still really cool to include. You have the best ending for both Chris and Jill, which involves saving Barry and Chris for Jill, or Jill and Rebecca for Chris. The alternate endings where either Barry dies but Chris lives, or vice versa, as well as the same for Chris's run, then the 2 bad endings for each character, which I like to call bad and worst. Worst being everybody dies except the main character you're playing as. Getting every ending is by no means an easy task, but isn't necessary. It's down to personal preference. In my playthrough here, spoilers again, I accidentally saved both Barry and Chris. I didn't set out to save either of them, I just sort of did, and I got the best ending. Or at least I thought I did, until Barry fucking died at the last minute to the final boss, turning the perfect ending I could have got into Jill's second alternate ending. But I'm getting way ahead of myself here. Right now, we're in a little mansion, we're solving stupid little puzzles. Using the arrow that I picked up, it turns into just a head, which we can place in a groove in a gravestone, forcing it to move and reveal stairs to a crypt of sorts, which will come back into play later on. In fact, it plays one of the most significant parts in the first, I say this in quotations, chapter of the game. For right now, we yoink the book on the pedestal and open it up to find the first of many keys, which will open new doors for us. Who knew that's what keys do? Here, when reading the book, we also get our first overarching objective clue. It states that there's 4 masks we need. A mask that speaks no evil, a mask that smells no evil, and a mask that sees no evil, and a mask that cannot speak, smell, spung, sping spang, spung sping spung, spang sping, spingling shongamangangi. You get the point. Each of these... Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, just keep going by in your shitty fucking 200cc bike. Each of these corresponds to a different death mask, with each mask missing either its eyes, nose, mouth, or all 3. These masks are completely integral to the advancement of the game in the first half, and I'd say the game goes into the second act once we've done them, but that's not going to be for a while yet. For now, we take the key and return to the mansion to go look around and loot. Using the key, we can now go upstairs, where the only door unlocked right now is the end door, giving us the dog whistle, as well as a lighter. The dog whistle will be useful to progressing, but I don't know that at this point. I left the room and came across another zombie who I quickly shot to death. Resident Evil 1 has a lot of backtracking and exploring, so for my sake and yours, I'll cut out all the walking around the mansion and checking the map millions of times. Fun fact, this game drained my life energy so much that I went completely schizo, and inside of my notebook that I use for taking notes and ideas for videos, I kind of drew the entire of the first and second floor of the Spencer Mansion, just so I didn't have to keep opening a different tab on my second monitor. Here it is. no artist, but it got the job done, surprisingly. I'm pretty proud of it. Don't mind the cool smiling thumbs up umbrella logo, poorly drawn at the bottom. Like I said, I'm no artist. Feel free to trademark that, by the way. First person to get that as a tattoo, I'll send you a box of cookies. Yeah, that's a good deal. Ruin your skin. I'll give you some fucking cookies. Here I used a dog whistle by going to an outside ledge and summoning dogs, so I can kill them all brutally and yoink the collar from their necks, which can then be turned into a replica key. Placing the key in the floor of the armor spike room of death allows Jill to take the real version of the next key we need. After this, we travel across the mansion yet again, and this time we run into Richard in a cutscene who's been infected by a giant snake, who we will come to know as the Yawn.
This whole place is a killing zone. There are monsters.
What did this to you?
A big snake. And it had to be poisonous.
Poisonous? Richard, hold on.
Bring me serum. I saw some, but didn't bring any.
I'll go and get it, okay? You're gonna make it.
Thanks.
Now we are given an objective, a clear-cut objective. We need to get serum from the opposite side of the mansion. What we don't know at this current time is that there is an invisible timer. If we take too long to get the serum, then we go back to Richard, he will be dead already. If we manage to give it to him in time, however, he actually helps us in the Yawn fight by sacrificing himself to stop the Yawn killing Jill. This is my second day of recording these fucking lines, and I'm losing myself. It's a long fucking process. I still have 5,000 words to record. I'm on the verge, which in my opinion is a lot more helpful than the Yawn, because the Yawn really is not that hard. But first, we need to actually get the serum, because at this point in the playthrough, Richard isn't actually dead. But I also managed to pick up the shotgun on my way, which is probably what took me so long and why Richard died, but oh well. I actually put off the Yawn fight for quite a bit afterwards and did a lot of exploring. Firstly, I picked up the incomplete music book, which is used to access the hidden doorway when used. I actually picked up the serum for poor old dying Richard as well, even though he would be he'd be a skeleton by now. Yeah, I got really lost here, to be honest, and this definitely would not be the last time I got lost. I got back to Richard in the end. There is a fly on my microphone. Fuck off, go away. I got back to Richard in the end, who had definitely died, and I explored around the new open area. Well, I say open area, it's really just 2 rooms. One of which had the Yawn in, and the other had the other notes I needed for the music book. I couldn't get them yet, because I needed a lighter to light up the room, so I backtracked all the way across the mansion again to deposit some items and take the lighter. I found my way to the grenade launcher on the way, which was by a STARS member's dead body, who got up and attacked me. Luckily I incinerated him to dust. I returned to the unlit room and yoinked the music sheet after being jumped by yet another zombie. It was now time to haul ass back across the mansion once again to the piano room. Here, Jill plays the first part of Moonlight Sonata, which she does a little too well. I mean, who knew she had prior training to play pianos? It's kind of impressive, to be honest, how Jill can even read sheet music, considering she's a fucking trained STARS member. You wouldn't think they'd be all too cultured. Playing the music, like I said, a wall opens up, revealing a gold emblem, but when we take it, the door shuts. The wooden emblem we need to use is actually back in the first hall. The idea of this puzzle is we need to swap the positions of the wooden and golden emblem, which will in turn open up the clock to allow us to solve another puzzle. Yippee, I love puzzles. Thankfully, later Resident Evil games do turn down the puzzles a little bit. They're still there in some capacity, but Resident Evil 1 definitely has what I'd consider the most puzzles in one game. After some fucking around and dying a couple of times, I finally got around to switching the crests, and yes, I used a wiki page to figure this out. Fuck you. I'm not ashamed to admit that for a lot of these puzzles I did use Google, and I'm not a puzzle lover. So, to me, puzzles just slow down the game, and I don't like slow games. Sure, Resident Evil 1 is slow, and I'll admit, boring at times, but that doesn't prevent it from being fun as well. Obviously, I don't get the same excitement from Resident Evil 1 now as I did when I was a little kid on Christmas opening up a PlayStation with Resident Evil and Metal Gear Solid 1 in it. My enjoyment from the remaster mostly comes from nostalgia, reliving the feeling instead of creating a new one. I took fucking ages trying to figure out the clock puzzle, but with my smooth brain, I just gave up and googled the answer. With the cock, why did I write cock? With the clock complete, with the clock complete, clock, not cock, clock, we have the next key to use. Very epic. With the key in our hands, it's now time to go explore some more. Turns out there was an upgraded shotgun which you could get that I totally missed in this playthrough. That's my fault. I'm just an idiot. After many rooms, I eventually did the first half of the lion statue by using the blue gem we got from pushing a statue in the first room. One side of the statue will give us provisions like ammo and shit like that. I think it's just ammo, shotgun shells. I don't know what it is for Chris's playthrough. It's probably the same. The other side, which we can't actually get to yet, contains one of the CD contains one of the CD discs that will be vital to saving Chris or Jill later on. Now, with everything we can do for now done, it's time for the boss fight. A boss fight that would make Indiana Jones fall onto the floor and have a fit, just like when Squidward had an existential crisis in SpongeBob.
X, Y, and Z.
Are the other letters of the alphabet involved here?
Sure, all 486 of them.
Thanks.
Yawn is relatively easy for us, and it's pretty good for a first boss, and that's how first bosses should be. I basically stood in a corner of a room and unloaded shell after shell of explosives, occasionally dodging him. Eventually, the yawn fucks off back into whatever crevice he hid in. We'll see him again later. Wink, wink. But for now, we've secured a death mask, one of the 4 we need to progress. As we've been poisoned by the yawn, a cutscene plays out where Jill faints in the corridor and is rescued by Barry, who conveniently takes her to the safe room where we found the antidote for Richard. A nice bit of continuity there, considering the antidotes and serums are in that room, so it makes sense for Barry to take us there. After recovering, I bolt over to the crypt to place the mask as to not hold up my inventory with it. Moving on after that to the next puzzle is the room full of suits of armour. The puzzle is simple in that you have to place all of them back in the corresponding order to what the picture says on the wall, which, in hindsight, took me way too fucking long to realise how to do this. I really do have an IGN reporter level of intelligence. That is to say none at all. Also, I killed this plant thing at the fountain with pesticide, which allowed me to take another death mask, so that's 2 secured now. That leaves the final location of the death mask to be behind the gallery in the cemetery. To open the secret passage, what we need to do is another puzzle involving lights. It's basically just press buttons in the correct order, but it took me a while to get it, and no, I didn't actually use a wiki for this one, so fuck you. I did it myself. Despite being ill and sleep deprived at 4 o'clock in the morning. I then opened the passage, securing the final mask, and then tracked back to the armor stand room to get the third, which is inside a box in the wall. Yeah, I quit doing the armor one, because I couldn't figure it out initially, so that's why the 4th one I did before the 3rd one. Or is it the 2nd one? No, it's the 3rd one. No, it's the 2nd one. Anyway, once we it doesn't matter. But right, the point is, at this point in the game, I now have all of the death masks. With every death mask collected, I ran back down to the crypt to place them. With every placement, we get a cool-ass cutscene of a coffin hung up with chains slowly getting released before falling, and it's so gothic-esque. It's actually one of my favourite non-cutscenes in the game. Once we go to the coffin now on the ground after falling down and blood oozing everywhere, a crimson zombie comes out. The gate is forced shut by some sort of mechanism. It's best not to question this. It just happens, so let's go with it. Crimson zombies, by the way, I don't know if I've mentioned them yet. They're like normal zombies, but faster and stronger. You've probably seen me evade a couple of them because honestly, it's more terrifying just to run away from them than to kill them. Also, if you kill a normal zombie without headshotting them on hardcore, there's a pretty decent chance, it's almost guaranteed that they're going to turn into a crimson zombie. To prevent this, you can use fuel and a lighter to burn the body, but they're never really that much of a problem, so I didn't really bother doing it. Anyway, I unload, again, explosions on this poor son of a bitch, and kill him, even though he's already died twice. No, he has died twice, yeah. He's a zombie, and then he died, and then yeah, I killed him for a 3rd time here. Only to walk back up to the coffin and pick up one of the coveted umbrella crests. We need 2 of these in order to open the big gate in the main mansion hall to the altar. But that's getting way ahead of ourselves. We're nowhere near that yet. With this crest in hand, we can open up the way to Lisa Trevor's place. Now, Lisa Trevor was never in the original Resident Evil, and she's honestly a really cool addition despite only showing up a few times. Lisa is the in the script I wrote, Lisa is the father of George Trevor. Lisa is the daughter of George Trevor, the man who is in charge of creating the mansion for Oswald E. Spencer, one of the founders of Umbrella. Lisa herself was subjected to a lot of various biological testing because, you know, Oswald E. Spencer and Umbrella, which in turn left her incredibly disfigured. However, she also gained a superhuman regenerative ability, which essentially makes her immortal. She also, I think, wears the face of her dead mother and maybe sister. I think that's the law. She's got 2 faces on her disfigured face, and she's got like a big hump on her back. She's really fucked, and for some reason her character model is in chains, which is... I say for some reason, it's probably very obvious that she was probably chained up somewhere in her shack while she was being tested on. But Elisa is a very sad character, and I'm glad they added her, because it builds more story. It builds more story around the Spencer Mansion. To be honest, Elisa's goal is she just wants to be with her mother, who is very dead, by the way. It's ultimately how she is killed by Jill a bit later on. Her love for her mother. It's very sad. After accessing the new courtyard area, oh god, I fucking hate the courtyard area. I went to drain the water in the pool, only to realise I needed the crank first. So I backtracked through the other door, one shit wind turbine thing puzzle later, and we're at Lisa Simpson. We're at Lisa Simpson's shack where we find the crank. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to... Oh, wait, hang on. Whew. Hello. Welcome back to part 2. I'm sorry, I was downstairs eating noodles. Let me fucking tell you something, okay? Hang on, I'm eating an apple now. Hang on. Sorry, I basically ran upstairs. I'm a fat cunt, so as I was saying, I was downstairs eating noodles. Let me tell you my recipe for noodles, okay? Because people are gonna think this is really weird, but just hear me out, okay? When I'm talking about noodles, I mean like bachelor noodles or super noodles or pot noodles or something like that. Not like Chinese or Japanese noodles like you put in fucking stir fry and shit like that. I mean noodles, right? I put tomato ketchup and cheese, and let me tell you, you are sleeping on noodle cheese. It is so fucking good. Noodle cheese is amazing. Oh fuck. See, I'm so enthusiastic about cheese noodles that my microphone is killing itself. Seriously, it sounds gross. It sounds fucking horrible. You don't even need the tomato sauce. I just have tomato sauce in there because tomato sauce goes well with everything, and I don't give a shit what people think about that. But cheese and noodles are so fucking good together. It's not even funny. It is amazing. Anyway, as you know, I've been sick the past week or so, and I've finally come back. You can probably tell I sound more energetic, but I am feeling much better than I was before. That doesn't mean I'm fully over it, but I'm feeling much better than I was before, and I'm ready to get back and finish this fucking Resident Evil retrospective. So, getting back into it, I won't lie to you. Holy shit, that fucking... My microphone fucking peaks! Sorry, I'm so sorry about that. For the next 6 hours or so, I struggled with a loop of doing a lot of walking and picking shit up. And then backtracking, only to lose it all again to dying, to the point I had to use a mod to increase my walk speed, which, ironically, from some karmic justice, made my character face through the floor when using ladders, which was as hilarious as it was annoying. There's a huge difference between dying and then having to voluntarily exit the game because of a bug from cheating. I don't know how to explain it. You just feel a hell of a lot more defeated knowing that you died, even though even though you've still cheated, you still fail. Eventually, I did take a break for a couple of days, and I came back fresh, feeling better. Resident Evil is a fantastic game, but it can be very, very taxing on the mind at points, especially when you get into the sort of loop like this. I don't think Resident Evil should be played all together in one run. However, I don't think it should be played too far apart. You should find some sort of sweet spot where you can play it, but also not overdo it too much, if that makes sense. So, play it as much as you can, but not all together in one sitting. Otherwise, you'll just be really fucking bored and you won't appreciate how the game is. When we arrive at Lisa Simpson's shack, we jump down and yoink the crank, where we get a cutscene introducing Lisa, who knocks Jill out flat on the floor for whatever reason, and she doesn't kill her. But then we'll begin to pursue us out of her shack, but you can see I panicked here and backed myself into a corner before absolutely MLG strafing that bitch. Then it's time for more fucking backtracking. Back to the pool to drain the motherfucker. So, Jill cranks one out at the pool and goes to the other side. Me and my smooth brain accidentally, repeatedly cranked that shit a few more times instead of just once. For some reason, we go down an elevator, or a lift as we call it in England, which is stupid because honestly elevator sounds better than lift. Yes, a lot of words I say you could probably tell. I used the American pronunciation because a lot of English words are shit. I don't like England. England fucking sucks. Oh, Jill got molested by a pack of murderous crows here as well. I forgot to mention that. And I got lost yet again. Eventually I found a house. I don't actually know what this house is. I could Google it, but it's not important because we're only here for maybe an hour or two of actual gameplay and then we fuck off. We'll call this Mansion 2.0. We'll call it... No, we'll call it Mini Mansion. Mini Mansion sounds a hell of a lot better. Right. So, we go to the mini mansion where, after a couple of rooms, I think one's a save room and the other one's just... We'll come back to that later. Jill gets tentacle hentai'd by plant roots in the floor. After that, we do a bit more walking down a hallway and a cutscene plays out where Jill listens in on Barry talking to somebody in another room.
No, that wasn't part of our deal. But it's not necessary to destroy stars. What about my family? If I play my cards right. Jill.
Barry, I heard someone talking.
Oh, you heard. I think age is starting to take its toll. Talking to myself is becoming a bad habit.
Talking to yourself? You alright? What's gotten into you?
I'm getting you worried, aren't I? But don't, I'm alright. I guess this creepy mansion has gotten to my nerves. Anyway, I think I'll go outside, get some fresh air for a change. Don't worry, I'm just going to get some fresh air. If I'm lucky, I'll get to waste some monsters along the way.
She confronts him, and he says he was talking to himself, which it should be clear by now that something dodgy is going on. And dodgy it is, but we're not quite to that big reveal yet. In fact, we won't get to the big reveal until the end of the game. Spoiling it for you now. I won't explain the plot now. I'm just saying I'll spoil when we get to the plot. Pushing the bookshelf to the right, we reveal a ladder down to the shark containment place thing. I'm not sure why Oswald Spencer thought it was good experimenting on sharks, but apparently under a house full of killer plants and bees, next to a mansion with elaborate puzzles and an underground lab, this is ironically one of the more normal areas to explode. Explode? Explode. This is one of the more normal areas to explode, I'm sorry. Jill yoinks a couple of keys and runs into a spider room. It's not a spider room, it's some sort of lounge room infested with giant spiders. I should probably tell you now, I have a big fear of spiders. I don't like spiders in any capacity. So this was not fun. This was not a fun section of the game, and it gets much worse from here. We also pick up a book which, spoilers again, will help us get to the next boss fight. But as of right now, we have to go kill a shark. We go to the control room, which is down the ladder and a few more doors from where it was before, and we have to balance some pressure valves and shit within a time limit, which was actually the most stressful part of this entire game.
Emergency. Unknown source of pressure detected. Locking all doors to achieve maximum safety. Reaching 30% of pressure threshold. Reaching 50% of pressure threshold. Activate emergency drainage system immediately. Reaching 70% of pressure threshold. reaching 90% of pressure threshold.
After solving that room, we can go to the Neptune room, where he is just kind of flaccid on the ground. What you're meant to do here is knock the key thing down, and then turn on the power generator, and then push it into water. No, sorry, fuck. You're meant to push the generator into the water first, and then turn the power on, which will electrocute him and kill him. But I didn't do that first time, and died to Shark Boy, which soft-locked me out instead of taking me to the death screen for some reason. Possibly something to do with the speed mods I had on. I had it on, yes, I had the speed mods activated at this time, but they weren't actually working at that time. They were sort of for moments when I was recording and died and didn't want to fucking, you know, like repeat nearly 2-3 hours, so I just speed up my walking. That's all I changed. All I changed was my speed walking. Yeah, so you hate me as much as you want, but I'm not spending, you know, fucking 6-7 hours just running around again because I'm a fucking moron. I get that's the point of the game, and I absolutely think you should play the game as intended, but because I've played Resident Evil before, I did not want to do all of that walking again. So for the sake of the video, for the sake of my sanity, I used a speed mod, okay? I'm just going to put that out there now. Right, finished. So as I died, I had to redo the last 30 odd minutes from the moment that I left Lisa's shack. Well, no, what actually happened is I ended up breaking my headphones by accident because of this. Like I said, the game can be very taxing mentally at times, which is why it took around a week to finish. While you watch me use the speed mod to continuously bring myself some more mental pain, I want to read to you this part of the game from the novelization by S.D. Perry. I have both books that cover Resident Evil 1 and 0. While they are technically not classed as canon, they do a good job of combining both Chris and Jill's scenarios into one story. In this chapter, Chris is the one to fight the sharks instead of Jill, but it essentially plays out the same way. Chris took a deep breath and plunged into the water, knowing it was crazy, but that he didn't have a better chance. He struggled desperately towards the first door, kicking off against the cement floor to propel himself forward in great bounding leaps. He hit the door just as the shark was turning up ahead and grabbed for the handle, choking, and it was locked. Shit. Chris jammed his hand into the wet vest and came up with Elias's key, fumbling through them as the fin glided closer, the wide, pointing grin opening. He shoved a key into the lock, the last key on the ring that he hadn't found the room for, and slammed his shoulder against the door at the same time, the shark now only a few feet away. The door flew open and Chris stumbled in, falling and kicking frantically. His boot connected solidly with the shark's fleshy snout, deflecting it from the opening. In a flash, he was on his feet. He threw his weight into the door, and in a slap of water, it was closed. He sagged against the door, wiping at his stinging eyes with the back of his hand. The lapping water settled gently into smaller and smaller ripples as he caught his breath and his vision cleared. For now, he was safe. He unholstered his Beretta and ejected the dripping magazine, wondering how the hell he was going to make it back upstairs. Looking around the small room, he saw nothing he could use as a weapon. One wall was lined with buttons and switches, and he trudged over to look at them, drawn to a blinking red light in the far corner. Looks like I found a control room. Aces. Maybe I could turn off the lights and get the shark to go to sleep. There was a lever set next to the flashing light, and Chris stared down at the faded tape beneath it, feeling a numb disbelief as he read the printed letters. Emergency drainage system. You've got to be kidding me. Why didn't anybody pull this thing the second the tank broke? The answer occurred to him, even as he fought it. The people who worked here were scientists. No way they were going to turn down the opportunity to study their precious Plant 42, sucking up the water from the man-made lake. Chris grabbed the lever and pushed it down. There was a sliding, metallic noise outside the door, and immediately the water level started to drop. Within a minute, the last of it had flowed out from under the door, and a gurgling, liquid gasp came from the direction of the broken tank. He walked back to the door, opening it carefully, and heard the frantic, wet thumps of a very big fish trying to swim through air. Chris grinned, thinking that he should probably feel pity for the helpless creature, and hoping instead that it died a long, agonizing death. "Bite me," he whispered. Eventually, I end up killing the shark this time, and not dying like a bozo, and then I make my way over to the room in the house to make the J-Volt substance needed to help kill the next boss, Plant 42. I forgot to mention, but next to the control room in the shark place is a room with tentacle hentai coming from the ceiling. What we're meant to do is use the J-Volt substance to get the roots to fuck off, and then return back to the hallway in the house, and into the next room where the bookcase is. There's a slight puzzle here, where Jill has to rearrange the pictures on the spine of the books here to make a complete image. It's a naked woman, but it's also got PS1 graphics, so hopefully YouTube doesn't mind. Maybe. After rearranging the books to create a complete image, the bookcase will move out of the way, revealing a door. The cool thing about Plant 42's boss fight is we don't actually have to do anything because we used the J-Volt substance on the roots downstairs. If we did things differently, however, a different scenario will play out, where we actually have to fight Plant 42 without Barry's help. I should probably mention that if we do the J-Volt substance, Barry will come in and a cutscene will play of him shooting a flamethrower at Plan 42, killing it, hence why we don't have to do anything. Either way, both end up the same way, with us gaining access to the next key we need for the mansion, thus ending the shark plant section of the game. Next up, more backtracking. Before we run off back to the mansion, we get a cutscene with Wesker fighting bees, who tries to make Jill believe that Barry is a bit sus.
Wesker!
Jill, so you're safe.
That's what I was going to say.
I apologize. It was all I could do to protect myself against those strange creatures.
I understand. Anyway, it's good that you're safe.
Did you notice? Barry, he sounded a little flaky.
Now that you mention it, yeah. I'll keep a close eye.
Maybe it's quite natural under these circumstances. It's not really our standard operation. Jill, our first priority is to get out of here.
I agree.
There are still rooms in that mansion we can't get into because they're locked up. I've been looking for ways to...
Okay, if there's anything, I'll go back to the other mansion.
I'm counting on you.
And then tells us to go back to the mansion, which we do. We can now access the room downstairs, which leads to some sort of display room with a door at the end. In this room, we pick up the jewelry box, which is important to getting us to the next portion of the map. The main objective now is to secure 2 stone and metal umbrella insignias, one of which is keeping the door to Lisa Trevor's shack open, which we'll backtrack to get a bit later on. But for now, our objective is to collect the second medallion. The immediate goal is to open the box, which we'll need a gem for. There's also an entire upstairs section that I can now access and explore. Up there is a room with rotating eagles. Basically, there's 2 items in each different mounted heads on the wall, and 2 mechanical eagles that will track Jill's movement. The idea is to run underneath them to the point they can't detect Jill moving, and then jump on top of the dresser to reach the shit in the heads. It's a simple puzzle that, once again, took my monkey brain way too long to comprehend. There's also a very important file that gives us a huge lore dump that's very easy to miss. I'd consider this to be one of the most important parts of the original story, and it is locked behind a completely optional collectible.
Attend, Chief of Secretary. Date, July 22nd, 1998, 2:13. X-Day is drawing upon us. Execute the following procedures within 1 week. Prompt actions are demanded. Lure stars to a state and obtain Bao's raw combat data against stars. Collect 2 embryos of each mutated specimens as samples, excluding the tyrant. Dispose of the tyrant. Ensure complete disposal of the Arklay laboratory, including all personnel and test animals. Disguise their deaths as an accident. When the above procedures are executed, report to headquarters for further instructions. If for some reason you are unable to execute the procedure by the deadline, report immediately. In a case of emergency situations, report directly to the extension number 5691.
The deer head gives us a red gem, which is used on the box we got earlier to start another puzzle. Easily one of the better puzzles because it's a jigsaw puzzle. Inside the box we are given the final major key for the mansion. In the other head is the yellow gem, if you're wondering, which is used on the lion statue all the way back to obtain the second CD key, which we need to save Chris later on. After all of this, we go to Spencer's little study room, where we pick up the metal insignia part. It's not the metal insignia we need, but it's the outside part. All that's left now is to get the stone ring, and then we are home free. Of course, I went back and picked up the other one holding the door open and attempted to use both to open the main gate in the main hall. But I then realised that it wasn't the complete insignia, because I needed the stone ring. My smooth brain strikes again. Thus, this little fuck up led to so much more unnecessary backtracking. But not before exploring this statue room, where I made the stupid mistake of locking myself in a position where I couldn't get out of the room besides killing myself. So, basically, everything I just did since Plant 42 has been completely undone, and I had to redo it all again. There really is something seriously defeating about being forced to kill yourself. I know these are stupid little problems that I create for myself, but if this was the PlayStation 1 Resident Evil, it probably would have taken me a hell of a lot longer to finish the game, which that's going to come up in my playthrough of Resident Evil 2 and 3 when I play the originals, because I will have to emulate them both, but hopefully that's not for a couple of videos yet. I struggled a bit during the statue puzzle when I got back to it, but for your sake I'll cut it out. Once both statues are in place, a hidden passage opens up containing the last book, and what I assume is the supposed grave of George Trevor, which has a switch we can press leading to a hallway with a big ass spider, or spiders should I say. The place isn't insanely important, it more or less just acts as a place to get back up from George Trevor's grave. It will, however, give access to the lift, which will unlock another new area of the mansion, the final area of the mansion that we haven't got to yet, the library. The library door is locked, of course, and on the way through the halls we can collect a battery, which will be used to power the lift in the courtyard. The way into the library is actually to go all the way back to the room where I put the fake key in the floor. There's a very, very hidden door in the back, which I think is really, really stupid. It's horribly designed. For a section that's so important to get to, you could so very easily miss this shit. Inside the book was an eagle medallion, which will be incredibly useful for towards the end of the game. To open the lab later on, we need two medallions, the eagle and the wolf. Normally you'd have to go over there and then find out that you need to backtrack back into the mansion to get these, but much like the CD keys, I'm collecting them now as to not waste more time later on. Next on the list was securing another book, which to no one's surprise is in the library. However, when we get there, the Yawn makes his grand return for one final fight. Once again, I pump him full of explosive lead to the point he smashes into a bookcase and dies for real this time. Inside the book that dropped from the Yawn smashing into the bookcase is the book with the wolf medallion, which means we can now technically access the lab, but we have more stuff to do here first. To no one's surprise, the next section requires more backtracking to where we crank 90s in the pool. We actually have to crank the pool again to reverse the flow of water, allowing the waterfall in the courtyard to stop and give way to a secret passage. With the elevator now working, we have no use for this route anyway, so it becomes useless regardless. Running into the hole in the wall, we arrive at the mine type area. I won't lie to you, very little happens here of note, so I'll break it down for you real quick. Jill comes across Enrico, one of the STARS members, who is alive, and says that someone in STARS is a traitor, and that Umbrella set them up. But he is shot before finishing his sentence and explaining himself.
Is that you, Jill?
Is that voice Enrico's?
Yeah?
You're alive!
Stop! Are you with anybody, Jill?
No, but why?
The STARS are finished. Someone is a traitor. Umbrella set us up.
Enrico! traitor? Who?
We run from some boulders, yes. I died more than twice to the boulders. There was a giant spider boss that I completely forgot existed, and I'm terrified of spiders. We then push a box to another location from one location. We smash said box to get a broken flamethrower, place said flamethrower on a pedestal to dupe Lisa Trevor, then eventually get the stone frame for the umbrella medallion. With all that done, we can finally collect the 2 emblems and go past the big gate. We are now officially in endgame territory. After finally opening the main gate, we run down the stairs where we arrive at an altar where Barry already is. And one of the most important cutscenes plays out before we fight with Lisa Trevor for the last time.
Jill, you're alive. I was worried, because I thought you were...
Start talking.
Calm down. I didn't want to do it. Believe me, I can explain.
Don't lie to me!
No time to talk. Jill, hand me my gun. Thanks, Jill.
Technically the first time if you count it, because we haven't actually fought Lisa Trevor properly before. We've just delayed her. The fight is fairly simple. All Jill has to do is push the stone pillars off, which eventually push Lisa's mother's grave top off, and she will jump down into the abyss with her mother's skull to her presumed death. We leave Barry and go up a small elevator to the final part of the game, the lab. Using the 2 medallions I so expertly acquired earlier on, Jill places them in the grooves around the fountain opening up a staircase to the underground facility. To be completely honest with you, for as hyped as it is, the lab is a whole lot of nothing. We use the 2 keys we have on CD readers to start unlocking the doors to the cell. The 3rd key is in a room on a table in the lab, so we can do that too after, and then we can check on Chris, who won't be able to get out of his cell just yet, but he'll be fine there. The next step is to refuel a power rod thing to place in the power room in order to start the elevator, which is fairly simple, except you can't run with it in your inventory. At least, I don't know if you can, but I wasn't going to test that shit with the equivalent of a small nuclear device in my pocket. When that's all done, we return to the lift where Barry catches up with us and goes down with us to the lab. Well, I say the lab, the underground part of the lab, because you know every lab has an underground part of the lab. What plays now is the most critical and important cutscene of the game.
Wesker!
Thank you, Barry.
Well, what do you know?
Oh, don't blame Barry for everything. I hear that his better half and 2 lovely daughters will be in danger if he doesn't do everything I tell him to.
Wesker, you're pathetic.
Well, you shouldn't worry too much, dear. You'll be free of all this anyway.
Why eliminate stars?
Believe it or not, that's Umbrella's intention.
You're just a slave of Umbrella.
Smart girl. But I think you misunderstand me. The things you mentioned are nothing. I'll burn all of them along with this entire laboratory. Barry, go up on the ground and wait there.
Barry.
You gotta love Barry. He must really be afraid of Umbrella.
You and Umbrella took his family, you bastard. Oh!
Umbrella? Well, I used some carrots and sticks to cow him, but it had nothing to do with Umbrella. I just used Barry for my personal interests. Though both you and Barry seem to think I was following Umbrella's orders.
What? What are you planning?
I guess it's time for show and tell. It's magnificent.
For the sake of this thing.
You know, I hate goodbyes.
Barry!
Forgive me.
No, you're not to blame. It's Umbrella and Wesker.
Even if it meant my family, I couldn't bear turning my back on my friends again. Shit! Damn it!
Jill and Barry together. In hell.
You want a piece of me?
What? Premature.
No, Barry! You viral cultured freak!
The traitor is revealed to be Wesker, who is using Barry's family as leverage against him. It's also theorized heavily that Wesker was the one who sabotaged the helicopter in the start of the game to lure Stars to the mansion. This is important because it shows that Umbrella are the real big bad guys of the Resident Evil game. Well, they will be from now on. Wesker does some, generic evil British villain monologuing about how he's using Umbrella for his own personal game, and that they're really just the pawns in his game. But yeah, you know how these villain types are. He eventually shows Jill the first Tyrant prototype. He's just called Tyrant in this game. He doesn't actually have a name because he's only a prototype. A Tyrant is also a form of bioweapon. A Tyrant is essentially a monster that's bred to be stronger, faster, and more intelligent than normal humans. However, this Tyrant being the first prototype and the first version, it's a little bit shit and dumb. Wesker goes to activate it, but Barry comes to his senses and shoots him, which does absolutely nothing to him because Wesker still presses the button. Fun fact here, Barry's gun is based on the Colt Aconda, which is essentially a revolver that's been modified to suit 44 Magnum rounds, which he shoots more than one bullet into Wesker. At this point in time, Wesker is still human, so those rounds should absolutely have very much impaired him to the point he couldn't get up, but because plot convenience, of course he does. The Tyrant comes out and actually turns on Wesker first. This is a bit weird. In the remaster, Wesker is sort of slapped by the Tyrant, but in the original, the Tyrant shoves his giant claw hands directly into Wesker, impaling him, and even holding him up for a couple of seconds, which to me is a lot cooler. I said that Wesker was human, and he is to an extent. He actually does have a version of a virus inside him that isn't active yet. The reason he survives the Tyrant attack is because his virus activates, saving him from death. Of course, we won't actually see Wesker use any of these powers for a while again after this. So it's worth mentioning that, in my humble opinion, I think it's better for Chris to fight Wesker here. In later installments, Chris gets his ass kicked by mutant Wesker, which leads to Chris buffing the fuck up and going through his training arc, which then leads to their final fight in Resident Evil 5. By having this game be an introduction to their long-lasting rivalry is, in my opinion, a lot better than Jill, who has next to nothing to do with Wesker again, apart from being mind-controlled in Resident Evil 5, but I digress. We're getting ahead of ourselves. Wesker's body holds a book which details the prototype parasite he has, but it also mentions Dr. William Birkin. who will be a massive part of Resident Evil 2. Next, we do a lot of walking. Barry joins us and we go to check on Chris to make sure he gets out of his cell, who also now follows us as well. At this point, the emergency blow up everything protocol has started and everyone agrees to head to the heliport to set off flares to contact Brad and helicopter. Of course, it's not going to be that easy, as the tyrant bursts through the floor, knocking out Chris and potentially, if you play your cards right, killing Barry. If you're not careful, which actually happened in my run here, which really fucked me off. Yeah, Barry is actually dead here, by the way. In this run, he's dead for good. The game also creates another staple of Resident Evil games, blowing up the final boss with a rocket launcher or some form of explosive, which drops from Brad. Jill backs up and aims the launcher, which explodes Tyrant to fucking smithereens. And with that, the helicopter lands, picks everyone up, flies away, and the mansion explodes to dust. We then get a small little cutscene of Jill and Chris together in the helicopter, and then the credits roll. I know, it's kind of an abrupt ending, but I mean, come on, this was the 90s. Thankfully, later games would give us some sort of closing epilogue or some sort of speech before fading to credits, but for a first Resident Evil game where everybody's still trying to figure out their footing and how they want the series to progress, I'd say they did a pretty damn good job. So, there we have it. That's the entirety of Resident Evil 1 in all of its stupid 90s glory. I've purposely left out a lot of the exploring the mansion, not because it would be absolute hell and the video would be a hell of a lot longer than it is now, but because I'm encouraging everybody to go and play Resident Evil. If you can get your hands on the original PlayStation 1 copy, do. In my opinion, it's far superior story-wise, but graphic-wise, you might be better off playing the remake. But Resident Evil 1 is one of those games where you have to sort of experience it for yourself. I've laid down the general basis of the story and the gameplay, but that's just my playthrough. You might get something completely different from what I've got. You probably have a different outcome, a different ending. It's worth playing through it to experience all the cutscenes that I've missed out, all the lore details and all that. If for some reason or somehow you haven't got into the Resident Evil series already, Resident Evil 1 sets the basis for a really, really good horror survival series, and it's definitely a fantastic place to start. Some people might suggest you start with 0. Don't listen to them. Alright, you start with 1 and then go to 0. That, in my opinion, is the best way to play this game. And I really do recommend this game. It's slow and it's painful at times, but it's really worth it. It's an important part of history, and it should definitely be played in your own time. So, we've had some goofs, we've had some gaffes, we've had some bioterrorism, betrayals, horrors beyond human comprehension, big snakes, big spider, big shark, Jill sandwich, which I didn't actually get in this run, which was very sad. If you don't know what Jill sandwich is, here it is.
Oh, Barry!
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right. Barry, thanks for saving my life.
It's safe to say that by today's standards, Resident Evil is not the fastest paced game, or at times, it's not the most compelling or intriguing game to play. It's hard to look back on the beauty of this game to appreciate what it did for the industry when we live in a world where games now are just saturated battle royales or buggy, shitty, unfinished messes. But it is impossible to deny that Resident Evil 1 has and will continue to have a very long-lasting reputation as one of the spawns of mainstream horror survival, and in more close detail, created one of my favourite fictional universes ever made. And even if later games took it down the shitter, it just gives us more reason to go back and appreciate the simplistic nature of Resident Evil 1 and how great it was. A couple of months ago, in the first retrospective, I discussed the first installment in the series, Shinji Mikami's 1996 masterpiece, Resident Evil. For those who don't know, forgot, or just didn't watch my original video, which, if you haven't, you totally should, Resident Evil 1 takes place entirely in the Spencer Mansion, which is in the middle of a forest in the fictional Arklay Mountains. The main team of Jill Valentine, Chris Redfield, Barry Burton, Albert Wesker, Rebecca Chambers and Brad Vickers are the only ones to escape after it blows up. Wesker is revealed to be working with Umbrella Pharmaceuticals, a pharmaceutical company who is secretly a front for developing bioorganic creatures, mainly intended for use in conflict, or bioweapons for short. Chris, Jill, Rebecca and Barry escape the mansion with Brad in the helicopter, but Wesker's fate is left in the dark, at least for now. Resident Evil 2, however, doesn't really carry on much from Resident Evil 1's storyline. I mean, it carries on from its core storyline. Umbrella and the slight mention of Dr. William Birkin in the original are both huge big plot points for Resident Evil 2. But before we get into the plot of 2, let's get into what the original group have been up to. Rebecca perhaps made the best decision. She quit what was left of the stars and went on to become a university professor, creating vaccines and medicine, and to be honest, after the shit she saw in the mansion, I can't blame her at all. Similarly, Barry left to do his own thing. We don't have a definitive timeline of exactly what Barry did, but there's a removed end cutscene in RE3 that shows Barry saving Jill from Raccoon City before it blowing up, and after that, he had some time to himself and turned down Chris's offer to join a BSAA. Basically, another STARS, but bigger this time. Barry eventually ended up joining and training new members. Chris and Jill were the busiest, of course. After the mansion incident, they both agreed to continue investigating on Umbrella. I won't talk much about what Chris and Jill have been up to because they both get their own game preceding RE1. Code Veronica, which takes place after 2, is that has Chris in it and also has the return of Wesker for the first time, and Jill is in Resident Evil 3. Coincidentally, both games released within the same year in 1998, but for now, just know that Chris spent 3 months trying to show the government that Umbrella was still developing bioweapons and attempting to take them down wherever he could. Jill stayed in the heart of it all, Raccoon City, and continued to do her own independent research while staying in contact with Brad. Of course, she was present during the Raccoon City outbreak, and because of her snooping, she became the main target for the newer model Tyrant, which was nicknamed Nemesis. But that's also for another video. The last character we don't actually hear from for quite a bit is Wesker. Without spoiling anything, he ran off and continued to sell BOWs after Resident Evil 1 and other viral agents on the black market, and he just generally continued growing his twisted goals. Of course, we can't get to the bigger plot yet. Resident Evil 1 was and still is a masterpiece, and greatly develops a thrilling and expansive universe outside the mansion in its masterclass storytelling. Shinji Mikami had Resident Evil's foot in the door and was met with copious amounts of praise. However, there was a big looming problem. If he had created a masterpiece with Resident Evil, how the hell do you follow that up?
This storm is coming like a ghost town. All the clubs are being closed down. This place is coming like a ghost town. Bands won't play no more. Too much fighting on the dance floor.
RE2 was going to make or break the series. I mean, Shinji and his team had to basically one-up perfection, or at least achieve that same level of perfection again, and somehow they fucking did it. RE2 takes a much more action-packed vibe. In fact, if you were to ask me to rate the original trilogy in order of least action to most action, I'd say RE1 has the least action, with a more lucrative emphasis on tight corridors and conserving ammo and puzzle-solving gameplay. RE3 probably has the biggest action vibe, straight off giving you a fucking machine gun from the start with huge Hollywood-level set pieces. And Resident Evil 2 has a fairly solid middle ground of both games. The precinct where you spend most of the game has a lot of tight hallways that are reminiscent of RE1, but also has loads of areas where it opens up a bit too, allowing for some actual action to take place. Resident Evil 2 stars 2 main characters, well, technically 4, but we'll get there later. The main two are Leon Kennedy, a rookie cop who's eager to begin his first day at the Raccoon City Police Department before realizing the city has become infected with some sort of virus, and Claire Redfield, sister of Chris, who came to Raccoon City to search for him. Before getting into the game, I should probably explain the scenario system that was absent from RE1. You can play both Claire and Leon's story, dubbed Scenario A, on the first playthrough. After that, you can do Leon and Claire again on Scenario B, which changes a lot, around mostly the layout of items and mainly adds this game's tyrant, who I will get to later. For now, I'm starting off as Leon in his A scenario. The game of course begins with a CGI cutscene, which I will let play out fully.
Terrible disaster had been caused by the T virus, a mutagenic toxin created by the international enterprise Umbrella Incorporated for use in bioweapon experiments. The Raccoon City Police Department's Special Stars Unit immediately began investigation in the affair. The case was apparently closed, thanks to the efforts of STARS members Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine. But the Umbrella Corporation's experiments were far from finished.
What have we got here?
That guy's a maniac. Why'd he bite me?
What could have done this? What was that? What are these things? All right, that's far enough. Don't move! Don't move. No! What's up with that guy? That was a clean hit. I'm running out of ammo here.
Wait! Don't shoot!
Get down! We can't stay out here. Head to the police station. It'll be a lot safer.
Going on? I arrived in town, and the whole place went insane.
The radio's out.
You're a cop, right?
Yeah, first day on the job. Great, huh? Name's Leon Kennedy. Nice to meet you.
Mine's Claire. Claire Redfield. I came to find my brother, Chris.
Hey, could you open the glove box?
Sure. There's a gun inside.
Better take it with you. You okay?
Still in one piece.
That maniac's gonna ram us! Claire!
Leon!
I'm okay. Head to the station. I'll meet you there.
Okay.
Something Resi 2 does is that it doesn't really change anything from the first game, which may sound awful, but realistically, it didn't need to change anything. RE1 was amazing, so it makes perfect sense to just improve upon its core style and gameplay mechanics. That's not to say RE2 doesn't develop its own identity, because I promise you, it really does. After a couple of playthroughs, you can kind of see the balance of what tropes were established in the first game and carried over, and what has been tweaked or added in number 2. The actual game begins seconds after the car crashes, with Leon running through the streets of Raccoon City. I started this playthrough in my original game before the footage got corrupted on easy mode, and I will say that this game is so much harder than Resident Evil 1. I unironically died about 3 times by just getting grabbed in the streets in both my Leon playthroughs. Seriously, this game will kick your ass at times. This first very short breath of air Leon gets is when he walks into Kendo's gun shop, where Kendo points a shotgun at him and then quickly puts it straight down. After some stealing of the handgun ammo variety, the glass window of the shop breaks and Kendo is eaten by zombies. Now, this is where things get cool. If you decide to stay and kill the zombies, you can easily get the shotgun right here on Kendo's dead body, or alternatively, you can get the shotgun later on inside a locker in the game. If you decide to get the gun from Kendo, you'll get it much earlier, but it will have 1 less shotgun shell in it, which makes sense because before dying Kendo did fire a shot. Now, this genuinely blew my fucking mind when I first found it out. It's a total unnecessary addition to detail that most people would probably have completely missed. After leaving Kendo's, we roam around the streets and through a bus, eventually ending up all the way at the Raccoon City Police Department. Where we go inside. Immediately, you will notice that despite its huge looking interior, the RPD is actually very claustrophobic in some parts, and any open area usually acts as a safe or downtime zone, like the library or the main hall or the first floor staircase. After some exploring, we find out that only 1 door is open to us at this point in time, and inside is a wounded police officer named Marvin, who gives Leon his blue keycard before threatening him at gunpoint to leave him to die. Leon reluctantly obliges and uses the keycard on a computer in the main hall to open up all of the other doors. The correct first route would be to explore the left side of the RPD. However, there's absolutely nothing stopping you from doing the right side first, apart from maybe like 10 zombies plus the zombies in the office. However, if you go left, we're introduced to one of the worst enemies to fight in all of Resident Evil history. Because I picked up the shotgun, however, the liquor can be taken down in a couple of shots. They hit like tanks and they are fast as hell, so for this reason I'd definitely recommend getting the shotty early, otherwise you'd be shooting around 10 pistol rounds into this guy. Once the liquor is dead, I did a moonwalk on his corpse for some reason and proceeded on. The main point of interest now should be the STARS office on the second floor. I stopped off in the press room to get one of the 2 important red gems which will come into play later. I also stopped along the way to complete a small statue puzzle to acquire the second red gem, which will once again be helpful later on. After a run-in with a few more zombies, Leon got to the STARS office. In the locker immediately to your right is the shotgun, so if Leon didn't pick it up from Kendo, here it is with 1 extra bullet in it. There's also a medical spray in Rebecca Chambers' bag, and you can look around the office for a bunch of other Easter eggs. We picked up and skimmed through Chris's diary, and under it was a unicorn medallion, which will give us access to the next key we need. Claire burst through the door when we finished with the diary, and Leon gives her it to ponder over.
Leon!
It's good to see you're still among the living. It looks like we're not gonna find your brother here after all. There's no reason for us to stay any longer than necessary. Let's split up, look for any survivors, and get out of here.
Right.
One last thing. Here's a radio. Take it. That way we can keep in touch if anything happens.
Taking a break quickly, there's an Easter egg in this room, actually. If you go to the desk in front of the STARS logo and press the action button 50 times, you'll be given a secret film. I didn't pick it up because my inventory was full and I forgot to go back and genuinely couldn't be fucked. However, thanks to the power of Google, it would look something like this. Yeah, so for some reason, Albert Wesker has an image of Rebecca Chambers in a school uniform. And to be honest, who could blame the guy, am I right? After this, we have to head back to the main hall, where we can deposit the medallion into a statue to receive the next key. On the trip back, zombie hands will crash through the window, and again, this unironically made me shit myself the first playthrough. If this game does anything well, it's its jump scares. While some are definitely predictable, they do a very good job at getting you. With all that shit done, we have the spade key now. The first thing I did was backtrack to the STARS office so I could get past and unlock the library. I also did the puzzle in there for one of the 4 plugs we need for later. After that, I walked out onto the catwalk and pushed down the ladder for easy access to the first and second floor. The next location is in the waiting room on the second floor. Before that, however, I went back down and explored the bottom right half of the precinct. I blasted from afar into this horde of zombies and ran to the corridor to kill 4 more before getting into the interrogation room to yoink the small key, which is used to upgrade the base pistol into a 3-round burst pistol. Then I span in circles for some reason. There was also the main office, which, to be honest, there's not a lot to talk about there. There's just a safe with some ammo inside, some handgun ammo around, and you could realistically just skip this entire room without clearing out the zombies, but it will make it a lot easier for you later on, trust me. I also forgot to mention, before I went back to the STARS office, I quickly grabbed the crank from a small room on the way. Next up was the waiting room, where we need to get 2 red gems before we go. Going to the right and down a hallway will lead us to the outside, but not before another crow jump scare. The idea of this area is to put out the flames from the helicopter, so we go to a little station and yoink the valve. Now RE2 does something really cool here. Every single time in number 1 and most of the time in number 2, when you open a door, you know you're going to be safe. It's what's on the other side of the door that's going to kill you. Yeah, there's no actual area behind that door, and zombies will start coming inside during the loading screen. Now that is just cool as fuck. It really does a good job of subverting expectation enough to keep you on your toes. Obviously, we next put out the fire and run past the helicopter to the room where we used the gems. There's both a key and a plug, which we get after doing a small puzzle, if you can even call it a puzzle, with the gems. Then it's time once again to backtrack to the room where Marvin was. Inside, we can kill his zombified corpse, rest in peace Marvin. Then Leon yoinks the next key. Then it's back to the interrogation room to get a cord and a plug, where we are greeted with another jump scare, this time from a licker. Fun fact, I have no idea what the cord does. I never figured it out, I never googled it, but considering I can complete the story without it, I'm assuming it's not that important. Back to the main office, and we unlock another new door which leads down a corridor to a set of stairs going down. We now have access to the basement. There's 3 dogs roaming the hallway, which for some reason I thought I could avoid unharmed, and subsequently died to and lost all progress since the waiting room. This game is fun, but it can be very, very taxing on you mentally at times. Fun.
Resident Evil 2.
A week later, after recovering from the crippling depression I got from dying like an absolute bozo, I regained all my progress and made it through the door at the end. A cutscene will play where we meet our triagonist.
Sorry about that. When I saw the uniform, I thought you were another zombie.
Who are you?
Ada Wong.
And what are you doing here?
I'm looking for some guy named Ben. He's one of those reporter types, always looking for a scoop. I heard he was locked up in the cell block, only there's a wrecked car barring the entrance. I've been trying to find another way inside. If we work together, we can move this thing. Give me a hand here, will you?
Ada will become Leon's forced love interest, and yes, a lot of people love these two together, but after playing the original RE2, the dialogue these two share is very much noticeably forced, and I'm glad in the remake that they gave these two some actual soul to their conversation. Ada keeps to herself a lot, not giving her real intentions away to Leon just yet, and greets him under the guise of being an FBI agent looking for her husband. First though, she has a contact in jail that she needs to meet. With no better option, we tag along to meet Ben, who does a lot of yapping. Basically, he has evidence that the police chief, Irons, and Umbrella are doing very shady shit that might have something to do with the current zombie outbreak in the city. He refuses to leave his cell though, as we hear inhuman screaming coming from somewhere. Ben says that there are worse things than zombies in the city. He also directs us to a manhole in the dog kennel, which Leon and Ada both go down to, which takes us to the sewer treatment area. We can put all the plugs in now. Well, the plugs we have, but it's really not necessary. We could wait until we have all the plugs. I just did it for the sake of, you know, because I can. Effort. After coming out the plug room, Ada and Leon talk again, where she decides only she is small enough to fit through a very high vent, and Leon boosts her up. We now take control of Ada, who has her own separate inventory and everything. Honestly, if you know what you're doing, this area really doesn't last long at all. She kills a couple of dogs, or just skips the dogs completely, picks up shotgun ammo, and then does a puzzle to get the last key we need. After returning to the big door, she somehow manages to perfectly throw both the ammo and the key through the vent shaft, and then tells Leon she's fucking off to go and find another way through. Now we have only one place in the RPD left, which is a press room. In the press room, there's a small fire puzzle. After lighting in the correct order, a golden cog will fall onto the ground, which is used alongside the crank from earlier to go do yet another small puzzle in the clock tower part, which will give us the last plug. I also took the time to get a couple more weapons. In the room next to the basement stairs is another room which has the Magnum in it. In the basement there's 3 rooms. One is a morgue, which has a red keycard and a bunch of zombies, which, you know, they're definitely going to come alive and are not dead at all. Next is a power room where we flip a switch, and the final room we get into by combining the power and the keycard in the armory. There's loads of ammo here, but what's really cool is that in a locker is an inventory expansion and a MAC-10. Leon states that after taking one, he should probably leave the other one to Claire, and you are given a choice of which one you want to take. However, there is absolutely nothing at all stopping you from taking both, which I did because I'm greedy. After the plug has been taken, a passage will open up, which we can jump down, and we are greeted by another cutscene. Some creature has killed Ben and put a worm of sorts in him. We only get a brief shot of what killed him, but it's enough to tell us that it's definitely something that's going to come for us next. His screams alert Leon, who races over. In his dying breaths, Ben gives up the info on irons, before a creature explodes out of his chest and runs away, just as Ada walks in, and the little worm fucks off in a different direction.
I don't believe this. I almost got the story. Ben. Bitter irony. The chief of police, a co-conspirator. Get that scum. Make him pay. Hang in there, Ben. Oh, my chest. It's burning. What's wrong?
Ada and Leon once again split off, and now we can unlock the final door of the RPD, that being the plug door in the sewer. Not before though, Leon contacts Claire on the radio and tells her to meet him in the sewer, where Claire gives a really fucking sad sounding response, like, she just sounds really fucking depressed that Leon wants to meet her.
Do you read me, Claire? We now have access to the back of the parking lot.
Got it.
I'm getting out of here and heading to the sewer. Can you meet me there?
I'm on my way.
When we get back through the door where the plug panel is, the worm from earlier comes back and evolves into a huge mass creature which spews out some smaller worms that will lash onto Leon. Naturally, I stood still and blazed him full of hot MAC-10 lead till he dies for good. With that out of the way, the final plug is placed and the way to the sewers is fully open, where we are once again met by Ada. And the two talk, with Leon becoming pissed about Ada going off on her own because, you know, when all is said and done, he is still a cop who has morals and cares about saving the lives of as many people as he can. It's very easy to forget that before the zombie apocalypse, people did actually have a job, and Leon's job was a police officer, so it would make sense that he'd want to protect the people around him, or at least whoever he can. We don't play as Leon for much time after this interaction. I deposited some items, pushed this filing cabinet, and took some ammo from the storeroom. Then it's off down an elevator before another cutscene plays out, where Leon is shot by a mystery woman who Ada seems to be after, and she runs off.
Leon, that woman was... I have to talk to her.
Here we once again control Ada, who follows the woman through a vent system into the next room. The unnamed woman shoots a gun from Ada's hand and interrogates her. The woman reveals herself to be Annette Birkin, the wife of William Birkin, the scientist who created the G-Virus. The G-Virus was a virus that had the intention of creating what I can only assume would have been the Tyrant, but more perfected. Annette reveals that Umbrella attempted to forcefully take the G-Virus samples from William, and in a cutscene he is shown being shot fatally by the Umbrella soldiers before Annette walks in and then runs off to get medical supplies to try and help him.
Don't move. You're the one who was with that cop, if I'm not mistaken. Identify yourself. Ada Wong. Ada Wong. I've heard that name before. Now I remember. One of the men from Chicago who came to assist the T-Virus research used his girlfriend's name as his password. Ada and John, I believe. How did you know? Who are you?
Annette Birkin. My husband is the man responsible for the creation of the T-virus, William Birkin.
What?
John's dead. He became one of those zombies. My condolences. And although I regret this, you will be joining him shortly. I won't let anyone take the G-virus away from me.
G-virus?
It's capable of creating the ultimate bioweapon. Its potential is even greater than that of the T-virus.
Then that must mean the creature in the police department is...
Precisely. My husband, William. And it's all Umbrella's fault. None of this would have happened if they hadn't tried to steal his research away from him.
This way.
It's sheer perfection. My precious G-virus. No one will ever take you away from me.
There he is.
So you finally come.
Doctor, we're here to collect the G-virus sample.
Sorry, but I won't just hand over my life's work.
Stop! You might hit the sample. That's it, all right. Okay, let's move out.
William. Oh my. Hold on, darling. I'm taking care of that bullet wound first. Stay here.
Alpha team, have you retrieved the sample yet?
Affirmative. We'll be at the rendezvous point in 1 minute.
Roger.
Are you telling me that he injected the G-virus into his own body?
The G-virus has the ability to revitalize cellular functions.
What was that? Something's wrong. Let's check it out. Over there! Shoot! Eat this, you freak! I'm stopping it! What is this thing? Hurry! What is this thing? Fire! Fire! You son of a...
So those rats were the carriers of the virus.
As a result of his virus-induced transmutation, William should have lost any prior memories he had as a human by now. Even worse, every G-virus bioweapon, including William, has the ability to implant embryos into other creatures.
And create offspring. No. Too bad.
William injects himself with the G-virus, knowing he will die, and as a monstrous abomination, he hunts down the Umbrella members in the sewer where the G-virus samples smash onto the floor and we see rats nibbling at the liquid. So we can assume that William is most likely responsible for the Raccoon City outbreak. The two women talk about the specifics of what the virus had become before Ada pushed Annette off a ledge into the water below. Going down a ladder, another cutscene plays out where Ada lets out a moan as she's attacked by something. We take back control of Leon and take a different route to where Ada is, picking up 2 medallions along the way. Some bullshit later and we catch up to Ada, but not before a huge fucking alligator begins chasing Leon. This fight is embarrassingly easy. You run a little bit and push over a propane tank, then blow it up when the crocodile eats it. The croc then blows up into a million pieces, and we can reunite with Ada. After that, the two walk off. We use the two medallions to open up a way through the waterfall. Some more travelling later, and they stumble upon a tram, which we start up and hop on. This is Resident Evil, however, so the two get absolutely no rest whatsoever. William makes another appearance by smashing in the roof of the tram till he eventually gives up after I shot him sometimes. When the train stops, we arrived in what I can only assume is some sort of sub-facility, or front to the Umbrella Lab? After some more walking and picking up a shotgun upgrade kit, we once again find another train. Once the train gets moving to an underground lab, William decides to start bashing the shit and hits Ada. Leon has had enough and leaves the train to fight him one-on-one. I immediately equipped my newly upgraded super shotgun and blasted shell after shell into him until he collapsed, and we get the chance to go back into the train to check on Ada. Of course, this doesn't kill William. After all of that, we enter the final act of Resident Evil 2. With the RPD and sewers behind us, it's time to finish it up at the lab. Ada is left behind to recover, and immediately Leon moves to the west wing to get a fuse to power the facility. After that, it's time to head east towards a giant plant. Don't worry, we don't have to fight this one this time, but we do have to fight infected variants of lickers, which very nearly did kill me many times. We do some shooting and moving and shooting and moving and come across a giant moth who we need to kill. Then we kill its children in the PC so we can enter a password to get a guest pass. With said pass, Leon can acquire a disc needed to get out of the lab. But as he exits, Annette Birkin holds him at gunpoint looking for Ada. She gives the generic villain monologue, revealing that Ada works for Umbrella and is trying to get the last sample of the virus that Annette has. However, Annette is immediately crushed by falling debris from the now self-destructing lab. I'm sorry, it's just... it's such a shit way to go out. Leon loots the G-virus sample from her dying body and runs off where Ada is to greet him. Oh Christ, this game can be hilarious sometimes, seriously. Ada turns on Leon and tells him to hand over the virus, which he doesn't want to, knowing she's deceived him and works for Umbrella. Ada can't bring herself to shoot Leon, and in a twist is shot herself by Annette Birkin, who is somehow still alive and uses the rest of her strength to dispatch Ada. Ada holds Leon on the edge of the railing, but she knows she's a liability to Leon now and decides to let go of his hand, falling to her death.
You can't do that. Ada! Ada, I've got you. Don't give up.
Leon, it's over. Just let me go.
Shut up. You're gonna make it.
It's too late, Leon. We both know it.
No! I promised you that we would escape. You just have to help me out here.
really wanted to escape with me, Leon. Escape from everything. Goodbye.
Ada!
So, this is what everyone's been dying for.
Leon is distraught and, in a frenzy of anger, throws the G-Virus sample off of the bridge. Now alone, he runs to the only door needing to be opened by the CD, and inside he's met one final time by William Birkin, who completely mauled me the first time around. Luckily, on the second time, I got some health and tried again. In the final fight, William has two stages. His starting stage, where he just sort of walks towards and attacks Leon, and then his second stage, where he turns into a dog-like creature, jumping around the room and lunging at Leon. After enough lead has been sufficiently pumped into him, he falls down dying, and Leon can finally run away and jump on a moving train, which is revealed to have Claire and an unknown girl at this time on it. The three all unite and successfully escape the lab. And that's pretty much where Leon's A scenario ends. Yeah, it just sort of cuts to black after this and the credits play. I can only really assume it was done like this in an effort to encourage people to play through Claire's story and the different scenarios, but when you really break it down, RE2 in just one playthrough is really short. It's made even shorter if you know where you're going as well, but to be honest, both of the B scenarios are the best and definitely more canon tellings of the story. But before we get to that, I first need to cover Claire's A scenario. As you'd expect, Claire's scenario A is largely the same as Leon's A scenario. In fact, we do everything pretty much the same up until the helicopter section. Claire starts in the same place and follows the same route with the zombies. Kendo this time will have a bowgun instead of the standard shotgun, which, to be honest, it's kind of shit. You'd be better off just using her starting pistol, which I did in this run. Claire doesn't start with a lighter either, instead she has lockpicks, a replacement for Leon's small keys. After finishing the Star's office and getting the key to unlock the library, a cutscene will play out in the hallway, where a little girl will be trapped by a zombie who Claire kills. The zombie, she kills the zombie, not the girl. The girl runs into the next room and Claire follows. Leon then shows up and greets Claire, who asks if he's seen a little girl, and he says yes, but he says it so fucking bluntly, like a little girl running around in fear is just a normal everyday occurrence. But like I say, everything plays out the same up until the helicopter. Claire does have some pickups that Leon doesn't have, like animal-themed stones that we have a use for later on. After extinguishing the fire as normal, Claire decides to blow up the wall next to it with plastic explosives she finds in the evidence lockup. After blowing up the wall, we can walk into Chief Iron's private study place, where he has a dead woman on his desk with her stomach cut open. It's clear to us, and by the way he talks about her, that he did it either for sick pleasure or another twisted reason. But Claire talks to him normally before leaving to explore the area of his gallery, where she first properly meets the little girl from earlier, Sherry. Sherry and Claire form an instant bond, as she's the only real person she's seen alive after all this, and subsequently follows Claire for pretty much the whole of the game now. However, she tells Claire that a monster is trying to get her, and we hear the scream of it, which prompts Sherry to run away back to Iron's office. Claire runs after her, but Irons and Sherry are both gone. On the desk is the heart key, which opens the door to the basement, which is largely the same, but Claire goes the opposite way to the Ada encounter. This time, finding an alternate route to the sewer system. Yeah, sometimes the writing in early RE games can be a little spotty at best and very convenient, where characters will run off and the person we play as will have no idea where they are, wander about and hope we catch up with them later, but this is the 90s after all. Instead of going through the parking lot like Leon, Claire goes the opposite way past the dogs to a manhole leading into a room under construction or possibly being renovated or something like that, with a save room. After leaving the save room, a cutscene plays out with Sherry going off to find her father and we play as her. She basically plays exactly like it's uncanny. She plays exactly the same route and objective as Ada, before returning back to the elevator where she throws Claire the key and runs back off. We now have control of good old Claire, where we follow literally the exact same route Leon took to the press room to get the golden cog. With the cog and lever, we can open the passage and take the last half of the blue stone. With all 3 stones collected, it's backtracking time to the police chief's office. I haven't mentioned this, but when you compare RE1 and RE2's layout, RE2 is far more superior in that there's so much less tedious backtracking needed than in RE1, which, sure, does make this the shorter entry, but the length certainly doesn't take away from RE2's quality over quantity-esque design. Back in Iron's room, we run into Sherry, who now agrees to follow us. Interacting with the painting on the wall, and 3 slots will open up, which house the stones we've picked up. When all are in place, a secret passage opens up where we can go down into some sort of back escape room / dissection creepy ritual place that Irons presumably used on his victims. Another cutscene plays out. This time, something Claire only hears instead of seeing. William is shown cornering Irons and subsequently infects him in the same way he did to Ben in Leon's run. Claire runs into the room to be met with Irons pointing a gun at her and giving her his generic villain monologue, before his face splits open and he dies. You'd think the next step would be to go get Sherry again, but no, the next thing is to go down this ladder to the sewers, where we first have to kill this bozo again. Luckily, with all my Leon attempts, I was now a master of his moves and quickly dispatched him with the submachine gun I picked up earlier. I then got Sherry, and we fucked off into the sewers. The sewer section is absolutely the same as in Leon's playthrough, so I won't go through it in detail. All you need to know is that Claire and Annette meet and both agree to help look for Sherry. Sherry falls down a water gate and meets William, who infects her in the same way as Ben and Irons, and Claire finds her and they continue on together. Of course, the next section is the tram, which takes us down to the tractor place. Again, the only notable thing here is before the lab, you can get the spark shot, which replaces the super shotgun mod for Leon. With all of that out of the way, we now enter the endgame for Claire's first run. So, as a side note, as of recording this audio, I found that the next 7 hours worth of video has been corrupted. That's the rest of Claire's A scenario and both of the B scenarios. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use somebody else's old gameplay. I'm of course going to link every video I've used here, but just note that going forward the footage is not mine because I'm not going to spend another 9 or so hours going through all the scenarios again just to catch up. The video would unironically and genuinely not be released until the end of March if I did that. So, Claire and Sherry go down to the train where Sherry starts complaining about her stomach, and somehow Claire just magically knows she's been infected despite never telling her or even watching herself. Much like Leon, Claire goes to 1v1 Birkin and the fight ends up the same way. When the train reaches the lab, Claire carries and lays Sherry on a bed, taking off her jacket and putting it on Sherry. Everything in the lab plays out pretty much the exact same until Claire meets Annette again, who has recreated the G-Virus and blames Claire for the killing of William. She explains to Annette that Sherry is infected and Annette is killed by the very much still alive William. She gives Claire instructions on how to create an antidote, which, you guessed it, we go off to do. Claire makes a serum and Leon contacts her, who takes Sherry to the train whilst Claire's making the antidote. Now it's time to flee the facility, but not before one last fight with Birkin, who's in his big dog form. When on the train, a different cutscene plays out where she kills Sherry, and they all seem much happier in this ending. Of course, none of these are the true canon ending, and that leads us into scenario B. I won't act like Claire and Leon's A scenarios are different majorly because they aren't. When you put it on paper, some things are moved about and a couple new weapons and items are shown. It's mostly doing what you did in your first playthrough, but slightly differently, and that gimmick definitely falls off towards the sewer part and past that. They are virtually the same game, just with different characters, and that's okay. It's only the second Resident Evil, and for a game that came out in 1998, I'd say it's fucking ambitious as hell. They did a damn good job. Of course, there are 2 more runs we need to go through, that's right. We're only halfway through this game. So, a big question you may have is, what is the difference between the A scenarios and the B scenarios? Well, I'm here to explain. I won't go through the whole game again for both characters, but I will highlight the main differences. For Leon's B scenario, most of the game plays out very similar to his A run. However, once he first arrives in the RPD, a new cutscene will play out where a helicopter drops a canister into the RPD containing the Tyrant 00, also known as Mr. X. Mr. X will now follow Leon around all the way to near the end of the game and will at times initiate a sort of boss fight. I really love the mirroring between the game and real life in this sense. The Tyrant in RE1 was obviously some sort of test for what the Tyrants could be in both the game in the canon universe and in the real life development team. I definitely feel like they wanted to explore more of what the Tyrant could be and how this idea could develop into something bigger like a mascot. Mr. X was born and redefined what an AI could do in the Resident Evil games. The way Mr. X works is that he will come into random rooms and attempt to immediately destroy Leon. You can waste ammo trying to take him down and, take him down temporarily, but it's much easier and better just to evade him. There's even a part in the press room that he will literally burst through a wall, which is definitely a first for a game on the PlayStation at that time. Aside from that, everything plays out the same. Leon's B scenario is the canon playthrough for him. Claire in her B scenario also doesn't have a lot of differences. Claire's B scenario is her non-canonical playthrough. Basically, it's just an adjustment of boss fights. There's not really a lot worth talking about. What separates the A and B scenarios is mainly the little details. There's a lot of smaller things swapped around like item locations and slightly different puzzle solutions. There's also way too many things to go over in detail, so it's probably worth playing for yourself if you want to have a look at some of the smaller things that make up the differences. So now we've been over every single possible playthrough of both characters. You may be asking though, why does it just end with them at a train on every single playthrough? What happens to Birkin? Well, I'm glad you asked. At the very end of Leon B, the train will start to rumble, and William, now mutated to a grotesque mass of flesh and teeth and tentacles and eyes, will latch onto the end of the train and rip it off. Leon has to pump what lead he has left into the giant eye in the middle of Birkin's deformed body, till eventually he collapses and blows up with the rest of the Nest facility. Then, finally, Claire, Leon and Sherry escape. Claire goes off to find Chris, and Leon and Sherry are detained by the police forces, then presumably decontaminated and brought into some sort of government sect. But for now, that's the end of the story of RE2. But that's not all I want to talk about. There is one last section I want to discuss. If you're anything like me, you were a shut-in kid who preferred to play on the Xbox and isolate yourself from everyone. I remember many sleepless nights watching YouTube while playing my Minecraft world for hours on end, something which I definitely could not do without turning into a literal skeleton now. Yes, I had unfiltered access to the internet. Of course, anybody who watches YouTube when playing games knows the struggle of having to find a long-form video, because who wants to be constantly changing the video all the time? One of my go-tos was the genre of top 100s or did you know style games. Some of my favourites were by a channel called Tazstop Videos, who had a really creepy intro for my young child brain, especially at like 3 AM. It's just so nostalgic to me now, more than scary. These sorts of videos would cover a variety of content like scariest Easter eggs or Easter eggs in general, or my favourite content from games. And it wasn't until I was showering the other day that I was thinking about what content had been missing from RE2. And so I went to look on stuff like the cutting room floor, and I kept coming across content I recognised, but I didn't know where from. That's when I had a huge wave of nostalgia when remembering these videos. It was because of these videos that I recognised all this trivia, and that will help me to write this segment. In short, YouTube good sometimes. What's crazy is that the cut content from RE2, if you were to compile it together, would be enough to make an entirely different game, to the point that the content has been referred to in the past as Resident Evil 1.5. Perhaps the most famous example of lost content in RE2 is with the character Elsa Walker. Elsa was originally what Claire turned out to be, minus the looking for her brother part. She would have been a school student with a massive interest in bikes, hence her outfit, which was a biking jumpsuit. Of course, her design played little part in crafting Claire, and what we got was similar but also completely different. Another cool unused concept is that there was meant to be a lot more sidekicks or AI characters like Sherry and Ada. Leon was meant to be accompanied by Marvin, the infected cop from the beginning of his run. Claire, on the other hand, still had Sherry, but also two guys named John and Roy who would have helped the pair. Chief Irons as well wasn't exactly designed from the get-go to be the villain we all know and love. In fact, there were sections where he would have helped Leon, but as we all know, this is all cut. Of course, RE2 was released on the PS1, which at the time had limited space for a game of 650 megabytes, which is such a tiny amount by today's standards, so obviously there would be a lot of level design and unneeded shit that they had to cut out. On one of these examples is that the streets were meant to be a lot more overrun, which makes sense. It is set in a bustling city with a population of quite a lot, so it's safe to say that there would be a lot of zombies. The developers tried their best to implement more characters to add atmosphere by doing stuff like cutting down on detailed models. However, the creative decision was made to scrap this and go with the more detailed but less in numbers zombies. Speaking of zombies, there were also some cut zombie behaviours, for example limb decapitation where you could blow off legs or arms and the zombies would still shamble towards you after. There were also more planned animations like climbing ledges and overall just adding more ways for zombies to pursue the player, which would have been so cool to see for sure. Some of the more interesting actual usable stuff is the amount of items, weapons and enemies that were cut. Flamethrower fuel, spark shot ammo and chemicals were all cut alongside a Calico M950 pistol and a Heckler & Koch MC51 machine gun. Elza would have begun the game with a 6-hour P228 as well as a burst handgun later on like Leon, with each character picking up a Beretta 93R and a Glock 18. We didn't know who would get what gun though. The shotgun also underwent a massive change. The original design resembled the first Resident Evil shotgun, with the same upgrades we see in the full RE2 game. There was also an unused Spaz 12 hand grenades were planned alongside acidic and napalm variants. The M202 flash from Resident Evil 1 was also meant to aid in killing William at the end. A metal pipe melee weapon was experimented with. A Ruger Super Red Hawk was originally the game's magnum alongside a Mach 11, HK51 and a Gatling gun, most likely to be accessed after the game had been finished, like an unlockable of sorts. Finally, the Colt Python was slated to return, the exact same as RE1's Barry Burton used. Some fun trivia for you here: the icon for the Spaz 12 in RE 1.5 was reused and put into Shinji Mikami's other game, Dino Crisis. There was also planned to be a different breed of zombie dog, web spinners would have hidden vents before attacking the player, and William Birkin would have looked a lot more monstrous than he already did. The alligator fight also played out the same, but with the addition of smaller crocodiles. Finally, and perhaps the most two terrifying words I will ever say in my life, man spiders and infected gorillas were also a cut concept. Had thank fucking Christ. Could you seriously imagine Leon fighting a literal fucking zombie gorilla? Do you know how goddamn strong monkeys are normally? They can rip skin off as they are. Imagine being a fucking zombie gorilla. There is tons of cut content and gameplay videos of RE 1.5. I don't think I could do it much justice in just one video segment, so I really encourage you to go and do your own research on the matter, or if it really interests you, there's also a really amazing video by Evil Blitz that's much longer, and a longer one by Ink Ribbon, which both go into great detail and are well worth your time. I think that in a different universe, RE2 could have been a completely different game from what we got. Would it have been better? Who knows, maybe adding too much content would make it worse, but maybe if we had better hardware during its conception, we might have had the best of both worlds. Who knows? So now that we've discussed the whole story of RE2, you've probably put together now that both scenarios don't really add up together. So what is the absolute canon story of Resident Evil 2? Well, the story of Resident Evil 2 goes a little something like this. On the 23rd of September 1998, Umbrella sent a task force of members, including one member called Hunk, to hunt down Dr. William Birkin in Raccoon City's Nest Lab in order to take his G-Virus samples to use for creating their own bioweapons. William Birkin refused to give up the virus, and a member of the task force shot multiple rounds into him and took the case containing the samples. Dr. Birkin, as he was dying, injected himself with the last sample of the G-virus and began transforming into a disfigured tyrant-like creature. He then followed the task force into the sewer and killed all of them but Hunk and destroyed the samples. In the sewers, rats began nibbling on the remnants of the virus and became infected. They then travelled through the sewer system, first infecting Raccoon City's water supply, and thus by the 24th, the Raccoon City T-virus outbreak began. The President of the United States of America quickly imposed martial law and locked down the city. Chief of Police Irons on the 24th and 25th made many orders in an attempt to intentionally weaken the police force's effectiveness, such as sealing all escape routes and emptying all weapon and ammo caches through the city. The CDC and various Raccoon City departments like hospital and fire aided heavily in evacuating any and all civilians they could. On the 26th and 27th, Marvin Brunau led a force of RPD members, including SWAT, to attempt to fight the zombies and thin their numbers in the area surrounding the RPD. This eventually failed, and they became overwhelmed, with Marvin retreating back to the RPD. Umbrella Europe decided to use the overrun city as a sort of sandbox playground for some of their newer bioweapons. They deployed both their Hunter B and Y variants, as well as a Nemesis Tyrant to hunt down any and all remaining STARS members to prove its loyalty and ability. On the 29th of September, the Army and National Guard were ordered to retreat and abandon the city, which created even more chaos. At midnight, Colonel Sergei Vladimir assumed command of all Umbrella personnel and ordered a helicopter carrying T-103s to drop multiple into the city, one in the RPD to kill any officers left and find the G-virus, and 5 more to a disposable. The HCF, or Umbrella's rivals, attempted to recover the G-virus as well by using Ada Wong and sending her to the police station to find Ben Bertolucci, an investigative reporter with possible information on the outbreak. With the incident still being covered up by the government, rookie police officer Leon Kennedy and Claire Redfield, sister of Chris, both entered Raccoon City unaware of what had happened. The two met up. It's not known exactly where they met up. It's most likely at a gas station on the outskirts of the city. A tanker driver also entered the city, but was infected by being bit at a gas station. The two drive into the city before being trapped in it by the zombified tanker driver, ramming into their car and blowing it up. Sherry Birkin, daughter of Annette and William Birkin, hid throughout the RPD using a vent system after being a part of a failed helicopter evacuation. At the end of the night, Umbrella released the T-00 into the RPD to finish its mission of killing all remaining officers. Leon eventually ran into Ada, who manipulated him into helping her find the Nest facility. During their time together, Ben was killed by either the Tyrant or an evolved William Birkin. Meanwhile, Claire met Sherry and made plans to escape the city with her when she found out in her brother's diary that he was not in the city anymore. In one scenario, Sherry is taken by Chief Irons, who by now has been established as a pretty fucked individual. He either takes Sherry to the Raccoon City orphanage after being attacked by a mutated Birkin and dies, or Claire follows him into a workshop in the RPD basement where he is again killed by a Birkin. Either way, Claire and Sherry escape to the sewers at the same time as Leon and Ada. On the 30th of September, the group meets Annette Birkin, who explains the G-virus and Umbrella's attack on William. Sherry was found by Birkin and became infected with a parasite. Claire and Annette worked together in the Nest to cure her, with Annette dying soon after. Ada attempted to steal the G-virus sample Leon had attained. She was knocked unconscious by the T-00 and mistaken for dead. Leon threw the sample into the chasm in anger. As day began to come up, Leon fought and killed the Tyrant in its Super Tyrant form. Sherry was treated, and Birkin was killed on the train leaving the facility. Claire, Sherry, and Leon escaped far past the Arklay Mountains. Claire left the two to continue looking for Chris, and Sherry and Leon were soon detained by authorities. On the night of September the 30th, Umbrella Agent Hunk, who was the only survivor of the Birkin attack in the sewers, managed to escape and get evac from the city, making him one of the few survivors. On October the 1st, the order was given to nuke the city. Over 100,000 people, including various POWs, were killed, and Raccoon City had been turned into nothing but a crater in the ground. Enter Resident Evil Outbreak, a 2003 game set in the beginning through way past the end of the Raccoon City outbreak. Funnily enough, the game sold over 1.4 million copies by 2006 with 91,000 units sold in the first week, which, while not insane, is it's still a very good haul for a new spin-off game from the Resident Evil series. So why exactly is Outbreak not as remembered as some of the others? Let's explore that. RE Outbreak and its expansion a year later titled Resident Evil Outbreak File 2 both follow the events of Raccoon City's infection and subsequent destruction through the eyes of a whopping 8 playable characters. Yes, you heard me correctly, 8 playable characters, a step up from the usual 2 playable characters, all of which do actually have ties to later games and even some of the other main characters in the series. Kevin Ryman is our first protagonist. A police officer at the RPD, he is essentially a beefier version of Leon. Now, if you're smart, or you've played games like this before, then you've probably come to realise that having 8 playable characters, 1 or 2 of them are going to be a bit boring and not as fleshed out as the others, which is very much true for Resident Evil Outbreak. Kevin actually is friends with Leon. They are said to know each other and respect each other. However, this isn't really gone into much detail in this game. The next playable character is David King, plumber, mechanic, and all-around man of few words. David is quiet, but gets what needs to be done. Mark Wilkins is our third character, a Vietnam War vet working for a security company in Raccoon City. He's old, but that doesn't take away from his strength one bit. George Hamilton was a big player at the Raccoon City Hospital as a renowned surgeon. George neither takes on a leadership role or plays it solo, but he will cooperate and easily gain the trust of others around him. Cindy Lennox is a popular waitress at the main location of the game, Jay's Bar. Cindy is accustomed to the harsh reality she lives in, and as a result, never really loses her cool in dire situations, making her a very valuable ally to have. Yoko Suzuki is perhaps one of the more important characters in this roster. She worked as an Umbrella Corporation employee. Later in the game, it's discovered that she actually worked in William Birkin's lab and was a donor of cells to help create the Tyrant model BOW. Alyssa Ashcroft is another important figure. She's a local field reporter for a local newspaper. She has ties with Ben Bertolucci and also harbours a deep memory of her colleague Kurt Diamond that she tries to keep down with her tough guy persona. Fun fact, actually, Alyssa is mentioned all the way into the newer games in Resident Evil 7, I think. Our last and most forgettable character is Jim Chapman, a coward who worked in the Raccoon City subway. While he's intelligent, he is very much a pussy who tends to avoid conflict. So, now that we know the entire roster and who all the characters are, let's quickly discuss their fate and what happens after the outbreak, so that we can discuss why the game failed. Here is where it gets complicated. Outbreak has a huge 40 ending cutscenes, with each character having roughly 4 endings based on how the final level is finished. Basically, there are 3 main ways to win the game. Solution number 1 is the player is cured of infection and escapes the city with enough vaccine left to bring it to light to the rest of the world. Another ending is where the player is cured but no cure is left, and the bad ending is where there's no cure and no vaccine, and the player obviously turns. Of course, there are different cutscenes for every character model, but it essentially all plays out the same, so take it as one of those 3 endings for every single character, just to dumb it down a little bit. After the events of Outbreak, assuming your character survives of course, the characters go on to do their own thing, presumably. Kevin is seen talking on a payphone about a new start in Miami before jumping on a bike and riding off, presumably settling down to a quieter life. Mark reunites with his wife and son, who also somehow escaped the city. Jim talks about going back to work to someone as he buys sneakers for some reason, I guess that's his thing. George helped create Daylight, a cure for the T-virus. It's assumed that he helped get the virus out of the city and became connected to various university laboratories to help reproduce Daylight. David is, well, it's kind of unknown what he really did after the outbreak. What is known is that on October 1st, he was aiding one Dr. Carter in recovering an antiviral drug, but failed because of its destruction by the R-Tyrant. David rescued another doctor either by Chinook or military vehicle, but that's really all we know about David. Alyssa went on to write about the BOWs and the outbreak, trying to bring Umbrella down, much like Chris and Jill did, but her claims were waved away and she continued her own career as a journalist on the Loki afterwards. Yoko went on similarly to speak out against Umbrella, and that's all we really know about her. We can probably assume that her claims were also waved away as well as Alyssa. Finally, Cindy escaped somehow and contemplated a new career as a nurse and settled down in the US in a new home. So that's that. 8 playable characters, 8 stories. Sounds pretty damn good, right? How could things have possibly gone wrong? Well, if you hadn't seen already, Resident Evil Outbreak's biggest flaw is that it's way too ambitious for the technology at the time. You don't just play as one character at a time. Well, you do, but in each stage you have 2 bots following you, each with their own inventories. What makes them special is that they will split up from you at will. They will attack when they want, they will even scavenge supplies when they want from whatever room they want. It's like having actual people to play the game with you as you do, which is understandable because Resident Evil Outbreak was originally designed as an online PS2 multiplayer game, and had PlayStation 2 multiplayer compatibility. I know that sounds like a pipe dream by today's standards, just saying it out loud, and to be honest it is, but somehow it works on the PlayStation 2. Obviously, I couldn't play with other people online because it's a nearly 20-year-old fucking game. Nobody is playing it. But the bots do a good enough job of emulating the experience of playing with other people online. The HUD is one of the first things you see, and yes, it's a bit of a clusterfuck. You'd also notice that there's actually a really cool virus system. Basically, when your character is sufficiently hurt, a sort of timer will start in the form of a virus meter thing, where if the meter fills to 100, you're fucked basically. There are pills you can take to stop it, but eventually it's inevitable. So, ranged combat really is encouraged in this game. However, that's not to say ranged weapons are a common occurrence. In fact, I'd say that Outbreak probably has the biggest amount of new weapons and items in any Resident Evil game to date that aren't just ranged weapons. For reference, here's a quick read-off of every item pick-upable. Pick-upable? Is pick-upable a word? It should be a word. I'm coining the term pick-upable. That's my word now, you heard it here first. Pick-upable. We're doing this in one take. No second takes. Here we go. Handgun SP, 45 auto, submachine gun, shotgun, magnum, rocket launcher, handgun for mark, burst handgun, nail gun, assault rifle, magnum handgun, grenade launcher, apule shooter, folding knife, survival knife, iron pole, stun rod, long pole, spear, pesticide, butcher knife, iron pipe, hammer, scrub brush, wooden pole, crutch, flame spray, bent iron pipe, broken clutch, yellow chemicals, Molotov, monkey wrench, stick concrete, grey chemical, ammo for every type of gun, staff room key, key with red tag, key with blue tag, forklift key, detonator handle, detonator, alcohol bottle, newspaper and bottle, storage room key, detonator main unit, frozen wrench, valve handle, VP017, lab key card, blowtorch, wrench, UMBN03, V-jolt, turntable key, blood pack, researcher's diary, keycard level 1 and 2, padlock key, LESN ID tag, male nurse diary, investigation request, Charles ID tag, gold key, security room key, silver key, red jewel, brass spectacles, blue and red jewel, card key, regent case, P-base, V-poison, daylight, T-blood, P-base, sealed regent case, lighter, medical set, toolbox, vinyl tape, picklock, broken handgun, herb case, broken shotgun, coin, battery, junk parts, knapsack, green, red and blue herbs, recovery meds, hemostat, antidote, antivirus, first aid spray, recovery medicine base, mixed herbs times 7, and finally 41 fucking optional files. Jesus Christ, that's a lot of fucking items for one game. When all is said and done, RE Outbreak is not a bad game. In fact, it shows a side of the Resident Evil universe we rarely get to see, if ever again. Usually we play as 1 or 2 people with superhuman durability fighting BOWs and other various inhuman creations that could kill any normal person instantly, yet they somehow come out on top. But in Outbreak, we play as a ragtag group of just regular normal people who happen to be in the same place, trying to survive a crazy zombie virus that's just ripped the city that they know and love in two. Each character has their own traits and items. They're human beings who lived in the city like normal. with their own decisions, demons and emotions. They just happen to have been thrust into the literal hell that is the Raccoon City outbreak, and it's up to us to help them survive. The premise is not bad at all by any means. I just think that the execution is what solidified the nail in the coffin for this. The game is filled with way too many overly ambitious set pieces, like the amount of weapons, the disorganized HUD, multiple characters, so many goddamn endings. I think if it had been more redefined for a later console with more power and sat in development a bit longer, it may have actually been remembered as a better Resident Evil. However, as it stands, Outbreak will be purged into canon hell, a dark place that exists between what is real and what conflicts with other entries in the series. Before I sign off on this game, I just want to say, one thing that I really love about Resident Evil Outbreak that I don't think I've seen in any other Resident Evil game to this day is the intro cutscene. The intro cutscene is fucking, it's preem, it's amazing. I'm just gonna let it play out, it's so goddamn good. The next spin-off actually spans from before Resident Evil 0 all the way to right before the end of Code Veronica. In fact, it goes way back before any Resident Evil game ever takes place. I'd say that this one is one of the most important games in explaining both Umbrella's conception and goals to everything Wesker is trying to do, as well as where he's been since 1 and during 2 and 3 onwards. That game is, of course, Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles.
Umbrella is finished.
You're just gonna walk away?
REUC is one of the first in a line of on-rail shooter games that emerged within the RE universe. An on-rail shooter, for those who don't know, is basically, well, if you've been to an arcade and seen those games where you have to pick up the gun and it moves automatically and all you have to do is shoot, yeah, that's what it is. The game was released in 2007 for the Nintendo Wii as an attempt to use its motion capture design in an attempt to replicate the feelings of pointing a gun in real life at the telly. It was also released on the PS3 for some reason, which kind of took away the whole motion control aspect, which is kind of pointless, really. It released with the main single-player game as well as an unlockable co-op mode, but let's be fair, nobody's playing the co-op mode for a 2007 Resident Evil game on the Nintendo Wii. Umbrella Chronicles follows the events of RE0 all the way up to a new section post RE3. It's hard to talk about the majority of the game from 0 to 3 because 2 of the games I've talked through already, and 2 I haven't even done yet. I will explain the new scenario though. Chris and Jill, after the events of Resident Evil 3, go to Russia to an Umbrella stronghold in an effort to destroy their Talos project. Talos is unironically one of the coolest designed BOWs we've seen in any Resident Evil game. Wesker also infiltrates the stronghold to recover important Umbrella information, where he is confronted by his long rival Sergei Vladimir, who he eventually kills. In what is possibly the most important cutscene in Resident Evil up to now, it's revealed that Umbrella's secrets have been exposed and that the US government finally takes legal action against their top officials. This little bit of movie at the end of a fucking Wii game will determine the path of the next generation of Resident Evil games. Hell, the ramifications of this still echo all the way up to number 8, the newest installment, so it seems very fucking odd that it be shoved onto the end of a fucking Wii shooter game. But I digress. While you can watch me play the game in the background, I'll fill you in on the important stuff that you really need to know and take away from this game, rather than just babbling on about each level in extreme detail, because it's basically the games I've already been through. In the RE0 section, Wesker is shown posing as the leader of STARS as he tries to escape the Umbrella training facility. RE1 section shows us what Rebecca did between RE0 and RE1, as well as how Wesker came back to life and escaped the mansion. RE3 section showed us both Ada and Hunk's backgrounds, and the final section shows Umbrella getting exposed. The rest of the game is literally just a walkthrough of the first 3 games that we've seen already, so it's maybe worth just watching the cutscenes on YouTube and not actually playing the game, because there isn't actually much gameplay. Overall, Umbrella Chronicles is a shit game, but it is very heavy in the lore department and fills in a lot of blanks previous entries created, as well as setting up the entire future of the RE universe going forward. I really wish it was made more mainstream than what we got, but at least we got some of the answers we wanted from the series so far, so that's more than what can be said for most games. While on the topic of Resident Evil's on-rail shooter games, let's take a look at the next one, Resident Evil Survivor. RE Survivor was released in the good old year 2000 to the PlayStation 1. In the canon timeline, it takes place just before Code Veronica, but also after the Raccoon City explosion. Our protagonist, Ark Thompson, was a pilot active during the nuking of Raccoon City. His helicopter crashes on Umbrella's private township known as Sheena Island, and he is greeted with the place overrun with yet another outbreak. He meets Andy Holland, who knows him as Vincent Goldman, who is said to be responsible for the outbreak on the island. Ark is not Vincent, however, he has amnesia, so he believes his name is Vincent. Ark was actually sent to Sheena by Leon to find the real Vincent Goldman. Because of his memory loss, he believes he is Vincent. Are you still with me? Ark meets two kids on the island, Lot and Lily. After some talking, they run and we follow them after fighting various enemies. Following them back to their house, Lily tells us that Lot has run off to an Umbrella facility to find a way off the island. After getting to the facility, Ark finds Lot, who reveals that Ark isn't actually Vincent, and that she knows who the real Vincent is. The two find a train system under the facility, but are stopped by both the real Vincent and a Hypnos T-type tyrant, who turns and kills Vincent similarly to how the original tyrant killed Wesker in RE1. The facility is self-destructing, as in most Resident Evil games, and Ark fights off the tyrant before getting on the train with both kids to a landing zone with a helicopter. They all get on board the helicopter, but the tyrant comes back and jumps on it. Ark fires 2 missiles at him, with the second missile killing him instead of the first one this time. The three then escape Sheena Island as the facility blows up. The reviews for this game were very unfavourable, as you could probably imagine. Even to this day, it stands at a 34% out of 100, with an average of 4 out of 10 stars, and for good reason. This is a very short game, and is quite boring, especially plot-wise. I imagine that an arcade shooter like this wouldn't have worked very well on the PlayStation 1, not to mention that the story itself is kinda well shit. I mean, it's not awful as a standalone spin-off, but they had to go and ruin it by adding in the Leon part and trying to connect it to the other great story. Anyway, as is Survivor is the second worst Resident Evil game to date, just slightly behind Umbrella Chronicles. No, actually, I take that back. Umbrella Chronicles is nowhere near as bad as this, and maybe it's a little bad to judge because this game came out quite a few years before Umbrella Chronicles, and this was one of their first on-rail shooter games. But I don't know, I really don't know. Survivor is just shit. I really want to like Survivor, but it's really crap. It would have worked better as not an on-rail shooter. It would have worked better as, you know, a standalone actual Resident Evil game with tank controls. But no, they had to go and fuck it up and make it all, you know, different. It had to be different, didn't it? But no, they had the chance to make a really nice spin-off game, but they fucked it. And that's where Survivor will go down in history as the Resident Evil with a 34% out of 100. Finally, we come to the fourth and final spin-off before covering Resident Evil 3 and Code Veronica. And this time, we're going back to the beginning. You've all seen it coming. You know I was going to do it eventually. Ladies and gentlemen, Resident Evil 0. Now, I'm going to get some shit for this, I know. People love Resident Evil 0, like, they love Resident Evil 0, and consider it to be a full main game, and yes, 100% they are correct. However, my argument is this, and it's a dumb argument, but this is the only coping mechanism I have, okay? In Resident Evil 1, Rebecca was a side character, not a main one like Jill and Chris, who both have main games after RE1 as main characters. Since RE0 is the only game with Rebecca as a main character, and probably her last fucking appearance in a Resident Evil game, not TV show. I still remember the fucking TV show when they're on the island, and yeah, I remember her being in that, but this is the last game she's in, okay? Because of that fact, okay, I consider 0 to be a spin-off. It is a prequel to 1, and if you want, you could technically consider RE1 to be the second half to the Spencer Mansion incident, with 0 coming first. For the sake of my sanity and everyone else, I'm going to refer to 0 as a spin-off, but I will give it the love and explanation it deserves, unlike the last two. What makes RE0 so good is that it feels exactly like the HD remake for 1, which is considered by some to be the greatest version to play Resident Evil 1, which is really cool considering how they both have the same style because they take place next to each other, basically. When I look at RE0 compared to other games on this list, I see it as what Outbreak could have been. If Outbreak tries too hard to add new mechanics and features, then RE0 does it with flying colours. Seriously, it feels like and encapsulates the feeling of 1, but with more improved and newer features that really add to it, and that's how a game should develop on from its predecessor. The main selling point of the game is the ability to switch between two characters on the fly and have them have their own inventories and exclusive abilities. This is how you do multiplayer characters in a Resident Evil game correctly. What's really funny is that Outbreak came out in 2003, a whole year after 0 was released. But I digress. Let's get into the story and decipher just what is RE0 about. If you remember all the way back to the RE1 video, two teams were sent to the Spencer Mansion. The stars A and B team. B team was Chris and Jill, Team A was Rebecca, who were all attacked before the events of Resident Evil 1. Rebecca is the only survivor at the moment and makes her way to a broken down train, the Ecliptic Express, where the majority of the game will take place. In a cutscene at the start, we see the train come under attack from leeches. These are actually the minions of one Dr. James Marcus, who is a very important character, but for now just know that he is orchestrating everything that's happening at this point in time. Rebecca explores the train and runs into her partner, Billy Cohen, who is actually a Marine who killed 23 people and was convicted. He was on his way to prison when the bus carrying him crashed nearby. Rebecca is rightfully suspicious of Billy throughout the beginning, but soon ends up warming up to him. The train begins moving again as the two see a mysterious figure outside. Unbeknownst to them, two Umbrella soldiers are attempting to destroy the train when it's moving, sent by Wesker and Birkin, but they are killed by leeches. The train speeds out of control and Billy and Rebecca pull the brakes to divert it to an Umbrella training facility. After some exploring and monster killing, they find out that James Marcus was the one responsible for discovering the progenitor virus in the 1960s and used it to begin developing bioweapons. He combined it with leeches and ended up creating the T-virus. As the pair continue to explore the facility, Wesker decides to leave Umbrella. Yes, Wesker leaves the Umbrella Corporation and joins its rival companies to try and make plans for further research on the T-virus. William refuses his offer to join him, instead opting to complete his research on the G-virus with Umbrella. Later, Rebecca becomes separated from Billy. She comes across Captain Enrico Marini, who you might remember from number 1, who tells her that the rest of Bravo team will meet up at an old mansion they found. After Enrico leaves, Rebecca is attacked by this game's tyrant. After temporarily defeating the tyrant, Rebecca meets up with Billy again, and together they kill him properly this time and continue onwards towards a water plant. The two finally meet up with the leech controlling man, who is revealed to be James Marcus's final experiment, the Queen Leech. Marcus was actually assassinated in 1998 by the Umbrella founder Oswald E. Spencer in order to obtain his research. Queen Leech entered his body and reanimated it, gaining the ability to shapeshift in the process. For better or worse, Queen Leech is using her creator's dead husk of a body to avenge him. The two fight the Leech, and Birkin orders the self-destruction of the facility. As is in every other Resident Evil game, something has to blow up at the end. The two eventually kill the Leech and escape. Billy goes on his own, and Rebecca says that she'll list him as a casualty, and Rebecca goes off towards the mansion, and then the events of RE1 play out a couple hours later as Rebecca meets Chris. RE0, in my opinion and the opinion of pretty much everybody who's played Resident Evil 0, is that it's a fantastic tie-in game and spin-off of Resident Evil 1. It's the perfect way prequels should be done. It improves upon the original story, but also adds to it. Not in a drastic way, but definitely helps to build the grander universe and give us a more in-depth look into the already established characters, while still giving limelight to the newer additions, and that's what makes RE0 so good for most people. Also, the fact Billy exists is probably a big plus too. All in all, RE0 is fantastic. Maybe not as long as some of the other games, but that's okay. It still has a great story and some great bosses. It doesn't need to be hours and hours long. It can be shorter than the rest of the games and still tell a compelling story. I kind of skimmed over the boss fights and the variety of enemies, so I'll go over that slightly now. There is a giant scorpion, a giant bat, and a giant centipede, as well as a prototype tyrant, and James Marcus / Queen Leech as a boss. There's also, of course, a lot of returning assets and enemies from RE1, the usual suspects, if you will, zombies, crimson heads, etc, etc. And yeah, that's pretty much all there is to say about RE0. I can't sing its praises any more than I already have. It's a fantastic tie-in game, it's well worth your time, and it's pretty much dirt cheap now wherever you buy games, so there's not really any reason not to buy it. It's also a great introduction into the series if you want to play this before 1. Either way, whichever game you want to play first is completely fine. I grew up with 1, so I played 1 first, but to be honest, if you play 0 first, it doesn't impact the game at all. You could play either 1 first, and I really recommend you give it your own playthrough. That's going to wrap it up. I want to address the fact that why I've put all these spin-offs into one game, into one video. That's because some of these games are really short and I just don't have a lot to say about them. RE0 and RE Outbreak are the only 2 games on here I actually thoroughly enjoyed playing through. I don't think RE Outbreak is a bad game at all. I really don't think it's a bad game. I think it's a fun game. It's a fun game. It's short. It's fun. And is it worth your time? Absolutely not. If you care about the lore and the story of the game, just fucking watch it on YouTube or something. Don't go out your way to get this game or play this game. It's not worth it in this day and age. But maybe back when it was released, it probably would have been worth a play. No, I digress. Umbrella Chronicles, Survivor, they're both shit, and I really don't have a lot to say about them. I've got maybe 2-3 minutes of information about them. The plots themselves aren't really that exciting because they've either already been covered or they're just plain shit. So there really isn't a lot I can say about the 2 games. So that's why I've decided to do all 4 of these inside one video. And yes, I'm aware these aren't all of the spin-offs, but these are all the spin-offs before Code Veronica, taking place in the canon story before Code Veronica. The next 2 videos I have are Resident Evil 3, and then straight after that, Resident Evil Code Veronica, and then the golden age of Resident Evil is done. I can move on from that. But I will release a video after Code Veronica going over, just like summarizing the golden age of Resident Evil without like the long fucking explaining of the game inside. Like like what I did at the end of Resident Evil 2, like how I explained what happened in Resident Evil 2's Outbreak, something like that. I'll explain from the events of before Resident Evil 0 all the way to where we get past Code Veronica. So that is the plan. Okay, that is the plan. I'm not going to slack off. I'm not going to slap off. I'm not going to slap off. After I finish this video, I'm going to play Resident Evil 3. I'm going to start Resident Evil 3. I'm going to get it out as soon as possible. That's my promise. I'm 100%. I'm on this, okay? I'm not going to slack off for another fucking 3 months, okay? But for now, I'll leave you before I start fucking... I'm already rambling. I'll leave you before I start rambling even further, because you're probably sick of hearing my voice for 20 odd minutes. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the Resident Evil 3 video in a couple of weeks. Maybe, who knows. Criminal. Hello ladies and germs, welcome back after a grueling 6 months to the newest Resident Evil retrospective, and finally the last one in the classic saga. So without further ado, hold on, before we start, you're going to see this guy from now on, who will help me to convey my emotions and just give you something to look at. There'll be various different types. This art, as well as the thumbnail, has been lovingly created by my incredibly talented friend Lex, whose socials you can see on the screen now. So if you are in need of amazing work, safe for work or otherwise, or wink, I encourage you to greatly go and message her. She's been amazing to work with on this, and I'm completely dumbfounded by how good the art has been in such a short amount of time. So go message her now. I am serious. No, I'm serious. This video is not starting until you go and message her. That's fine. That's fine. I can wait. I have all the time in the world. Okay, seriously, why are you still here? Go. Go now. I swear to fucking God! By 1999, Resident Evil had slammed its foot into the doorframe and defined itself as the big boss. When you can say my name as the name horror games, and had made it clear to everyone around them that they weren't going anywhere anytime soon, and the ramifications of the success of Resident Evil has led to thousands upon thousands of games following the same controls or atmosphere of the early games. Shinji Mikami and Capcom had created a giant of a franchise, with not just one game labelled as a masterpiece, but somehow 2 back-to-back games labelled as such. So after the overwhelming success of Resident Evil 2, it was apparent that they were going to try for a third time, and by God, they were going to get it right again. However, Capcom got very greedy, and because of them, the third game, unfortunately, does not reach the same heights as the original 2. Now, don't get me wrong, this doesn't boil down to just Capcom's greed. It boils down mostly to Capcom's greed, but it also comes down to really poor management overall. Capcom saw the success that the Resident Evil franchise had brought so far and decided to start many different Resident Evil projects on the side. I am sorry. I know this is meant to be a serious review, but I'm very sick right now. I'm dying. I'm actually gonna die. It's over for me. I'm a 20-year-old man and I've got the flu. It's actually over. I'm dead. I'm gonna die. It's been nice knowing you all. Thank you all for your support, but I'm gonna fucking die. The next installment was originally going to be directed by Hideki Kamiya, known best for directing Resident Evil 2 and Devil May Cry 2 years later. The plot for this game would have interestingly followed Hunk transporting a G-Virus sample from Raccoon City via a cruise ship, which is a very similar environment to both Resident Evil Revelations and another great horror game called Cold Fear, which surely I will never cover on this channel, right? Capcom swiftly cancelled this, however, as Sony had announced the release of the PlayStation 2. After the announcement of the PlayStation 2, Capcom had a huge panic attack. The PlayStation 2 created a big array of discourse for Capcom, and as a result, they scrapped the original Resident Evil 3 idea and adjusted it by promoting one of their side projects to the forefront and pushing Kamiya and his remaining team to Resident Evil 4, which, in my opinion, without the 4 and a bit years of cooking they had now for Resident Evil 4, I don't think it would have been anywhere near the massive game it is now. I think that getting rid of the original Resident Evil 3 and pushing them to the side really changed the course of history, because we could have had something completely different. But we are living in the best timeline. We had to sacrifice Resident Evil 3 and the quality of that game so that we could have Resident Evil 4, and I think that's a pretty good trade-off. I'm not gonna lie. You know what? I'm sorry. I keep getting distracted here. I'm gonna go off on a tangent quickly. I live in England, and if you didn't know, England is a shithole. Don't get me wrong. I live in a really bad place, but it's not as bad as Birmingham. There's some crackheads outside arguing, and now fucking 7 alarms are going off. So not only do I have the flu, I got a new tattoo as well, so my hand is killing me. So I've got that to deal with, I've got the flu, and now I've got these arseholes outside who keep fighting, so yeah, England. So if you're wondering why this video took so long to come out, it's not entirely because I'm lazy, it's because everything else around me just hasn't fallen into place so I can comfortably record this video. The project that would become the Resident Evil 3 we all know now was created by a very, very inexperienced team and had the absolute plan to introduce a brand new character who would take the same position as Jill in trying to escape Raccoon City. However, Capcom ultimately made the executive decision to make the main character Jill. The game was not created by Resident Evil's flagship team, and I can't emphasize enough that this was an entirely brand new, inexperienced team. They were put on such a monumental task as making the next mainline Resident Evil game. Could you imagine the stress that these guys were under? However, I will admit, Capcom didn't just put them in a room and say, hey, make a Resident Evil game. Okay, bye. No, the team had their script and story read by the original main team, and they worked very closely with all of the directors and producers to ensure that everybody was happy with how the plot of the game would play out with the Resident Evil universe. With that, development on RE3 Nemesis was in full production, with only one problem. They had less than a year to make a full mainline Resident Evil game. It seemed like an impossible task, but Capcom and Resident Evil were no stranger to impossible tasks. They had managed to make 2 banger games, so surely making a third one wouldn't be that difficult, would it? A new group of inexperienced game devs being forced to make a brand new mainline RE game to combat the likes of RE1 and RE2 that would not only live up to its predecessors but also set the standard for how Resident Evil was going to play out in its universe next, with a compelling story that not only expands the RE universe but complements the already established lore, and do it all in under a year. Somehow these crazy bastards did it. Sure, RE3 was received worse than its counterpart, and sold considerably less, but it is still a pretty damn solid and, well, universally acclaimed all around, with some even calling it the most sophisticated Resident Evil game yet, and yet, to be honest, that's a pretty accurate assessment. The team bumped up the environment, the enemy spawns on screen, and most importantly, the new Tyrant system and AI. Resident Evil 3 was set out as a much more action-packed game to its predecessors, with mechanics now included like dodging and quick turning, and a lot more action set pieces. The stakes were never higher, both for the IRL development team and for Jill Valentine herself, poetically so that both were under intense pressure to accomplish their goal in time. Before I begin covering the game, I cannot stress enough that the vision for it was always for it to be a side game with less runtime and for it to cost less. This is why I'm going to skip over a lot of the later game, because it's just as rushed or repeated from older games, so just a disclaimer that the game, and subsequently so the recap, will be shorter after the midway point of the game. Resident Evil 3 begins with the usual exposition describing to us what happened to Jill and what she's been doing since the Spencer mansion of RE1, which took place roughly 3 months before the destruction of Raccoon City. She gives us some much needed insight into how Umbrella is a massive company that no one can even begin to step up to. She goes on about how the wheels of justice, and it's implied that either her or someone else is legally trying to bring down an Umbrella to the best they can, but they're failing greatly. We then, for one of the first proper times, get to see the actual carnage of the Raccoon City outbreak from a grounded level during the start, as civilians are getting killed left, right and centre. The entire police force is sent out to try and combat this, and Umbrella sends in its cleanup crew to try and eliminate the threat that they inadvertently created. Of course, we know that Umbrella is really using the outbreak as a sandbox for their tyrant bioweapons, as we will see very soon. What follows this is a CGI cutscene of everyone dying in various horrific ways. Jill is immediately thrown into action, literally from an explosion from her apartment complex, which that's a hell of a way to start a game. What pretty much everybody will realise first of all is that she has a fully automatic gun as her starting weapon, but we quickly find out that even that isn't enough, as Jill is quickly surrounded and forced through a door where she meets good old hang on, let me just Dario. Yeah. She meets good old Dario, who is okay, fine, you got me. It doesn't matter who he is, okay? Who gives a fuck who he is? He's locked himself in a container and, I don't know, he fucking dies off camera or some shit. Fucking fat blonde bellend. Jill leaves him behind, and after longer than I'd like to admit trying to find the door out of that place, escapes into a back room that leads to the city. We also get a glimpse at some new items and a new mechanic. We see that health sprays now have a sort of bundle pack box thing that contains 3 sprays to save space. We also have 2 handbooks that explain the dodge mechanic and the reloading tool item, which allows us to use gunpowder, which is now a thing, and can be combined into different types of ammo. This is all basic stuff now, but at the time this was completely new. Going back to the dodge mechanic, I'll be completely honest, I've rarely used it during my gameplay, and I managed to get through the game just as easy not using it, but I guess in later difficulties there are times where it could really be a lifesaver. The streets in this game are cool. The level design, goes seamlessly from a tight corridor environment that we are used to a wider open area, but don't get me wrong, the majority of the game is usually tight alleyways. The map this time around is a lot more jarring and intimidating with its size compared to the other RE entries. While we explore Raccoon City's areas, there's a lot more zombies than we are used to, and more frequent too. However, these are only the base zombies that can be easily dispatched with the minigun while we have the ammo. We eventually run into Brad. You remember Brad. He is the helicopter pilot from RE1. Yeah, Brad. He's fighting off zombies. He then warns us that some sort of, incoming threat is hunting down STARS members, and that means he's coming for us, one way or another. After some more running around and killing zombies, we get to a gate locked with rope that must be burnt off before progressing. After burning it with a lighter and gas, Jill makes it to outside the RPD, where we are officially introduced to the certified son of a bitch that is Nemesis.
Jill!
Brad!
We've gotta... Jill! Help!
He immediately makes his mark as our opponent for this game by killing Brad straight away with no remorse. It's here we are introduced to yet another mechanic, the live selection system. In each encounter with the Nemesis, the player is given two options and they must choose one. The choices are normally to either fight him or to run away, which the option we will pick will affect either the environment or the gameplay. Of course, I'm not some sort of monster who will keep you in suspense of what the outcome for each choice is, so I'll tell you what I chose and the outcome of both options. I chose the safe option of running into the RPD and avoiding the first fight. The main MacGuffin here in the RPD is Brad or Jill's star card, which is needed for the computer. If we chose to fight Nemesis, we would have access to the card much earlier by looting Brad's body outside at the cost of precious ammo in the early game. However, by running into the RPD, we now have to go and find Jill's card inside, which can take ages if the player doesn't know where it is exactly. The first choice of this game basically just comes down to how fast you want to get through the RPD section. It's also worth noting that on the hard difficulty, killing Nemesis each time will drop an item, that being 2 parts of a handgun, a first aid box, 2 shotgun parts, another first aid box, and finally an assault rifle or infinite ammo weapon, depending on if you finished the game prior or not. However, these are more incentive to kill the Nemesis rather than flee. This is only a thing in hard mode, so for my run it's completely pointless to take into consideration. However, since this is my first main encounter, it's about as easy as finding a paedophile in the Minecraft community. The game now technically branches into 2 sections, so look at it as 2 different runs that converge at the same sort of point. In my run, I choose to flee into the RPD and avoid confrontation, where I now needed to go and find Jill Starr's key, which added around 10 minutes or so, and is found in the meeting room if you were interested. If I had fought Nemesis, however, I'd already have gotten a keycard and thus never needed to go all the way to the meeting room. Are you starting to see how the choice system works now? It's not going to impact the game greatly, however, it does add just a little bit of extra game design. That is certainly appreciated. It's nice to have it rather than to not have it. Using the card on the PC, the security systems are now lifted, giving us access to the rest of the RPD and to the STARS office most importantly, because that's our destination. Keep in mind, this section takes place before Leon comes in, so some parts in RE2 are actually affected by what we do in RE3, which is kind of cool. In the evidence room, we can pick up a STARS key and a blue gem, which will be paramount later, so get it while you can. Up in the STARS room, the idea here is to just look around. You can get the revolver here and a couple of extra items, but really nothing happens till you leave the room, where in true Resident Evil fashion, the radio magically comes online. The next objective is quite vague, and we're basically told to go meet these guys for evacuation near the subway system tram station thing. Here is where the game really opens up to the player. You now have all of Raccoon City's vast streets to explore and find your way to where you need to be. I say all of Raccoon City. Obviously, for a PlayStation 1 game, it's impossible to, gauge that scope. But you get access to most of downtown Raccoon City. And honestly, for one of the first ever free roam games, well, not free roam games, but for one of the first ever games with an actual semi-open world, it's quite big. It is quite a big map. It can be jarring to somebody who's just jumped off of Resident Evil 1 to play Resident... I don't know why you'd play 1... well, actually, no, it would make sense to play 1 and then 3. Yeah, so if you go the canonical route and play Resident Evil 1 and then Resident Evil 3, I imagine it can be quite jarring, but I'm glad I played 2 before 3, because I get, like... I'm more akin to Raccoon City now. I'm not going to cover every little detail here, because the video would be longer than it already is, but I'll go over the main plot points to help progress the story. You remember that gem from earlier, the blue one in the evidence room? It's crucial to opening the City Hall gate, which is activated by a time lock and is missing a couple of gems. So, first stop is to take a detour to the newspaper place, where upstairs we are introduced to Daddy Carlos in all his pixelated glory. Before we can get out though, Big Nemi comes up to rock our shit, and here we get our second choice: hide or jump out of the window. This time I decide to hide, which knocks Nemesis out from an exploding pipe or some other MacGuffin, but he immediately wakes up and starts chasing us. Carlos springs into action, and I became stun-locked behind him, so it was up to his trusty machine gun to destroy Nemesis, but apparently even that isn't a match for him, and Carlos died horribly. Yeah. So, naturally, I armed the fuck up this time and went back ready to fight the bastard, and after just a few magnum rounds to the chest, he fell to the floor, gyrating in pain. Our next area is the basement of a kitchen. This is where the choice system effect plays out. Since we killed Nemesis in the newspaper, I say killed, quote unquote killed, Nemesis in the newspaper place, he never comes to this area, and we are technically free to explore leisurely to find the green gem. If we had jumped out the window, however, we would have met Nemesis here, and he would have fucked this place up, making access to the kitchen impossible, meaning we would have to find another way out and back onto the streets, with the gem being in the newspaper place now. Little differences, but still important nonetheless. With all the gems in our hands, we can now go through City Hall. We end up in the tram with Carlos's people. There is a lot I'm going to skip over here, because in all honesty, it's just go here and solve this puzzle and get this MacGuffin, and I also want you to have some sort of reason to want to play the game for yourself. If I explain everything, it takes away from, the beauty of Resident Evil. The main takeaway story points are that we need to get the tram running. To do that, we need 3 components that Jill has to go and find. There's a Nemesis fight that is so small and short that it's not even worth mentioning. Oh, and Jill fights a giant sandworm. Back at the train, they group start it up, and surprise surprise, Nemesis jumps on. We can now either fight or flee to another train carriage. Carlos's buddy Mikhail will die either way here, and we will end up cutting the brakes, which will derail the train into the clock tower area. The decision you make, either to use the emergency brake or to jump out of the window, you will end up in one of 2 sections of the clock tower. Again, it just determines how fast you will get around this place. The clock tower is, all in essence, kind of short and very boring, in my humble opinion. The section of the game is where most of my complaints come from. The beginning story and section introduces us to a semi-open world and large map with choices that affect the linearity of the story. You have a lot to explore, a lot to find, and there's a nice blend of environment between Resident Evil 1's close quarters combat areas and also an open world map where you can, investigate puzzles, you can do your killing, you can get items and stuff. And it's really cool. It's a nice concept, and it's a good early mark of Resident Evil 3. However, the clock tower is pretty much completely linear and can be done in only a few short minutes. After some running around and some very infuriating puzzles if you don't have a guide, we end up on top of the clock tower. and we turn it on so we can signal a helicopter, but Nemesis, being Nemesis, blows that shit up and decides to fuck up Jill. Carlosito comes in and tries to kill Nemesis, but is hit onto his ass. The section ends and Jill is now unconscious and infected, meaning for the time, we are now playing as Daddy Carlos. Daddy Carlos! I know I am skimming over the clock tower section, but that's because the majority of it kind of feels like a small RE1 section with the tight hallways and, you know, the puzzles that are needlessly complicated, and I'm fairly certain that that's where the inspiration for it came from. I'm not skipping it because I hate it or because I'm lazy. Well, no, I'm really skipping it because I don't want to take away completely from your experience should you decide to play it, which I really think you should play it for yourself. With Jill unconscious, I'd say this is most probably the halfway point of the game. Carlos now heads over to the hospital where we need to find a cure for Jill, but surely there's not just going to be a vaccine for this virus laying around. That would be ridiculous. Oh, I guess they just had a vaccine laying around. That might have come in handy for, yeah, that might have come in handy at some point. The hospital blows up and Carlos escapes back to Jill, where he can administer our MacGuffin vaccine. The hospital is, again, a very small section of the game itself, and is much more action-packed. Nemesis punches through the roof into the hall with a brand new badass look to him, and we can just run into the next room, and then the next room. And finally, we will meet with Jill again. Carlos tells her that Nikolai is somehow still alive. If you don't know who Nikolai is, because I haven't done a very good job of explaining who Nikolai is, you don't really need to know who Nikolai is. He's just a Russian guy who's like evil. He's a part of... I forgot to mention this, actually. This is a very important plot piece that I probably should have mentioned in the beginning, but I'm mentioning it now. Carlos and his team are part of the Umbrella cleanup crew, which is why Jill distrusts Carlos, because she blames Umbrella for all of this, and rightfully so, it is their fault. So she sees them coming in to, you know, clean up their shit as kind of a fuck you. So she's really not trusting of the crew, and Nikolai is, well, surprisingly evil. Not just because he's Russian. I'm not saying Russian people are evil, but they do make very good generic villains. Finally, now it's time to move on to where the endgame takes us. You guessed it, a lab. Jill runs through a courtyard, a sewer system, and ends up in a confrontation with Nikolai in a helicopter. That was our only form of escape. So we are now pretty much boned. A voice calls over the intercom saying that a missile strike is coming and Jill and Carlos fucking blow up and die. That's it. That's the end of the video. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in my next video, which is going to be a true crime video. Yeah, right, so thank you guys. I'll see you next time. Sorry, I had to include that dead unfunny bit at least once in a video. Actually happens is Jill runs about for a bit into a final confrontation with a heavily mutated final form Nemesis, where after a grueling last battle, we get one final choice: run or exterminate.
Stars? I'll give you stars.
Killing him will cause Jill to give one of the corniest and coolest one-liners to ever grace human history. Running is, well, you run away. So, we all know what the correct option of the two is here. Of course, after finally escaping via a helicopter, we know what happens. Raccoon City is blown up once and for all. Finally, we never have to talk about Raccoon City again, and the game ends with Jill saying Umbrella is going down. We also get a final touching cutscene, which is a nice fitting end to the RE3 classic trilogy. And that is quite literally how the game ends. I could sit and explain how I skipped a lot of places and puzzles, but if I sat and went through every single tiny detail, you would be so incredibly bored. The game was rushed by a completely new dev team who had little experience at all, and it really does show in the later half of the game. I cannot stress this enough. The later half of the game, towards the midpoint at the clock tower, it dies down heavily. It's definitely good. RE3 is definitely good, but it does not match up to RE2 or 1. It doesn't even come close. But that, ladies and germs, is the original trilogy of Resident Evil in its entirety. We have now covered RE1, RE2, RE3, as well as Outbreak, Zero, and everything in between. That leaves one more side game before we can enter what I like to call the experimental era of Resident Evil games. For reference, 1 to 3 I class as the golden era, or the classics. 4 to 6 is the experimental era, and 7 to 8 so far is the modern era. Now that I've fully covered all of the original games, I can solidly say that going back to how slow these games were, and how the writing and gameplay in general was back then, was a chore. People always tend to act like the classics are the better version and the best way to experience the games, and they do a really good job of being classics. They are the original at the end of the day, and that's how it was intended to be played. I'd much prefer the remake of 1 and 2 any day of the week compared to the originals. Sure, you could chalk that up to me being born in 2003 with games well past that era. However, I can sit and play through Metal Gear 1 with no problem. For some reason, old survival horror is just, well, it's labelled as classic for a reason. That's not to disparage you from going and playing these games. Please, if you can try them. In my humble opinion, the best way to play them would be on the original hardware. If you can get a PlayStation 1 and the original disc copied of these games, do it. Play it on a CRT TV with no guides, no internet, nothing. Figure everything out yourself. Play these games as they were intended to be played. I am not by any means saying the original games are horrible by today's standards, but the simple fact is, they are dated. Soon enough, they'll be reaching nearly 30 years old, and it's okay to admit that old games aren't always going to be exactly as good as we remember them being. Times change, preferences change, and with today's normalized standard of HD textures and ultra realistic graphics, it's hard sometimes to go back and appreciate those earlier games. But I think that if you can go back and genuinely enjoy the game you've played as a child that changed your life and still relive those games without a doubt or any hindrance to that memory, that is something very special that you should cherish. Classic RE has had a monumental impact on gaming and has set foundations for many companies, many games, and the ramifications of their success are still heard today. After the lackluster reception of RE3, I think Capcom wanted to take a break to try and rekindle what made Resident Evil great to begin with. While Code Veronica would release a year later in February 2000 and RE0 in 2002, it's RE4 as the next mainline game in 2005 that would establish Resident Evil as the legendary series it is and would truly redefine first-person shooters. But for now, let's just take a small minute to appreciate the older games, to appreciate where we came from, and give thanks to the amazing work the beginning teams did in creating such an amazing franchise that I love, that you love. You're watching this video because you love Resident Evil and you wanted to see a recap on Resident Evil 3. Whether you've played it before, whether you just want to hear my opinions, we are here because we share the same common interests. And without these teams, without these games, without this trial and error and all this in the 90s, we wouldn't have this connection. We wouldn't have these games. Who knows where we'd be? But for now, I think it's time we put classic Resident Evil to rest and let it stay where it should be, in the past. Well, there's actually one more section I need to talk about before letting the trilogy go. While ultimately, it's hard for us to say what the original team wanted to go with, but what we did end up with lost a lot of its stuff. To begin with, our fan favourite character, Tofu, was found in the game, but is ultimately unused. Rest in peace, Tofu. As for items, we have demon coins, remote control and batteries, a broken fire hose and adapter, giga oil, a chain, chemical, keyring, and a dummy or developer key, which is just the spade key for Resident Evil 2, which I think is just a stand-in. Jill has also had quite a few costume designs and changes, and that's honestly pretty much it for Resident Evil 3's cut content. I wish that, well, there is more, obviously, we don't know how far along they got in development of the original Resident Evil 3 with Hunk, but we can assume that there was, Hunk's missing model, some enemies from there, and obviously the cruise ship. But again, we don't know how far they got into development with that, so we can't really turn around and say how much of that content is missing. I won't bother going over what RE3 was meant to be, as I have technically already covered that to begin with. RE3 in all essence was a rush job, and was always meant to be a side game sold at a cheaper price. However, after the cancellation of the Hunt game, which was meant to be RE3, it was promoted, and thus we ended up with the RE3 we all know now. And it's a good send-off for the PlayStation 1 that will always remind us where we came from and how much, the series has developed over the years. It's also a good reminder of how Capcom could fuck things up. And that is that. Finally, I promise this time. 3 games, a handful of side games, and Raccoon City's story has come to an end. Much like how the conclusion of Raccoon City allows the Resident Evil universe to finally move on and develop outside the city, so too will this video allow me to finally expand out of the Resident Evil content, at least for now until I cover Code Veronica. It has been an amazing few months, and Resident Evil has skyrocketed my YouTube channel into what it is now. I'm speaking like this is the end of all Resident Evil videos I'm ever going to be doing, but for a while it's going to be the end of Resident Evil, because doing all these classic games and finding time to play through them and record the audio and write scripts and stuff has just become draining, and that's okay. I'm a human being. Human beings get drained even if they enjoy what they do. I love doing YouTube, I really do. I love making these videos, but I'm still allowed to get drained out from this. But when I do Code Veronica in probably a couple of months, Code Veronica will be interesting because I've never played through Code Veronica all the way, so that will be new for me. So I can actually give an honest opinion on Code Veronica from a perspective of somebody who's never played that game. So I am looking forward to playing through it and recording that. But for now, I am just really happy to get this video out after 8 or so months. So much has happened in between that time, so that's why it's taken so long. But I'm just happy to finally get this out. Thank you all sincerely for sticking around this long and for making my channel what it has become. I know people really don't like the soppy fucking, they don't like this soppy shit where people actually thank them, but at the same time, I don't think enough people do it. Enough YouTubers don't show their human side a lot, and that's what I like to do at the end of these videos. I like to show my human side, because I am a human making these videos, obviously. I'm not just running it through an AI and asking them to create the script. No, I genuinely do appreciate every single view, every single like, every single comment. It gives me a drive to keep doing this. Don't get me wrong, I love talking about games and I love making videos, but having that extra, having that confirmation that people are enjoying the stuff I'm putting out, just, you have no idea how much that, accelerates my ability and willpower to actually do these videos. So, honestly, thank you all for sticking around this long. I want to say thank you again to Lex. I know I suck her dick a lot, but her art has been amazing and has been the cornerstone of this video, basically, and I couldn't have made this video nearly as good as it is without you. So again, thank you, Lex. You've done an amazing job, and I can't wait to do more with you in the future. So that's it. After this video, I will compile all 3 of these games into one long video with new editing, fixed audio, and extra features. You can see that I have sort of fixed my re-uploaded Resident Evil 2 video. That's done a lot better now. I'm very happy about that. But there's not much I can do for the audio on that because I no longer have the original project. So I'm hoping that this video's audio will be a hell of a lot better, and if it's not, then I don't know, fucking leave me a comment saying I'm a retard. But no, yeah, I'm hoping, like, at this stage in time, I know a lot of people say this, but every video I make, I strive to make it a little bit better, and hopefully with the editing and the sound quality in this one, you can see that, because I really do want to improve my quality of video, and I'm really trying, and I hope you can see that. I'm also going to create another video, which will be telling the story of Raccoon City from beginning to end. You might have seen I created, well, it's got basically no views, but I created a short story reading of The Raven on my channel by Edgar Allan Poe, and I want to keep doing that. I want to develop that series a little bit more, not so poems from like ye olden times, but, you know, creepypastas and SCPs. I know it's been done to hell, but I'll make it interesting. I want to do horror stories and stuff like that because I grew up with it, and that is an aspect I really like. So I want to do that kind of with my other series as well. I don't know, we'll see how it takes off, but I want to experiment with doing a Raccoon City explanation video with a lot of editing and stuff, so keep an eye out for that as well. I feel like creating a not a conclusion, but a total recap of everything we've been through over the past few months into one little condensed video so you can easily get it is a really lovely place to end off. So I will stop rambling, I promise. With that said, until the next video, stay safe, and thank you for watching me yap for about an hour. I'm very sorry you had to go through that, but thank you for some reason sticking around. Goodbye! When you can't even say my name, has the memory gone? Are you feeling them? Go and call my name. I can't play this game, so I ask again, will you say my name? Has the memory gone? Are you feeling numb? Or have I become invisible?